Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, September 14th of 2016. The meeting is now called to order. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to silence your devices. Mr. Paulson, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Hudis?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Vice Chair Kane?
Here.
And Chair Badami.
Here. Would everyone please stand and join Commissioner Birch as she leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty.
The Town of Los Gatos strongly encourages participation in the public process with verbal and written comments. To speak on any item tonight, please complete a speaker's card located within the benches and follow the instructions on the back of the card. Matters relating to agenda items will be heard during the itemized public hearing. Matters not on the agenda will be heard during verbal communications. This evening, we have written communications in the form of desk items for items number 3 and item number 5. Have commissioners had an opportunity to read the correspondence? Does anyone need more time? We have a requested continuance this evening for item number 2, as agreed upon by the applicant and the appellants. Do I have a motion to continue the item to September 28th as requested? Vice Chair Kane?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Birch?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, members also serve on various town subcommittees. Do commissioners have any reports to share from recent committee meetings, such as one earlier this afternoon? Commissioner O'Donnell.
As the chair knows, 3 of us met this afternoon with the CDAC to consider one matter, a proposal to change the zoning on a piece of property that's zoned 2.5 acres. They want to change the zoning to 1 acre. And the CDAC, as you all know, is merely a matter of giving input to the prospective applicant. So after consideration and a full and open discussion, we concluded the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. And I will add to that, in case anybody's interested, the address on that application was 15560 Shannon Heights Road. Verbal communications. I have one speaker card this evening, and that would be from Angelia Dorner.
I don't need anything for once. Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. I sincerely just want to thank you for your deliberations and decision on 401, 409 Alberta Way. The first meeting, August 10th, the night after the first town council meeting on the North 40, with the deadline for the next day's public comments and the next meeting, I was working away at home, but had the set on for background. But I could not force myself to stop listening to you guys. Other than sorely missing Chairwoman Badami, your deliberations were spot on, thorough, comprehensive, and challenging. Second meeting, I was glad to be tuned in again and glad for the decision and the continuation of your efforts in the deliberations. I might be a sap sometimes, but I was heartened, proud, and privileged to have you all dedicate yourself to the sake of this town and to its residents. And then I got mad. I got real mad because the Streamlining Act forces us to use the same time constraints on a project of that size compared to a project of the size of the North 40. It reminded me that every 20 years or so, the investment market and fashions come back around. I recalled an old line back then that quickly got overused in the advertising field. Think outside the box, color outside the lines, all the way to Taco Bell with think outside the bun. That's what I believe we collectively as a town need to do with our current planning application process, not to address inadequacies per se or anything else that has gone wrong in the past, but to adopt to the ridiculous mandates thrust upon us by the state as it relates to our discretionary approval of projects that affect us all so deeply. Streamlining time clock happens once an application is considered complete. I ask each of you, in your free time, what changes might be done in our application review process that could facilitate your vetting process and make your vetting process more effective in the timelines that you're going to be forced to utilize. List using these two examples, these two projects, the Alberto Way and North 40. List the kinds of things that really would have made you feel more confident in your role if those things had been vetted out prior to an application being deemed complete. Because once it's complete, we're stuck with a time clock. So I just ask you to list out some ideas, some questions. I'm hoping that our town will be receptive to whatever comments you can provide, and it will make a huge difference because the next one's right down the line, and we've got to do something. We have to think outside the box and change the way we have done things in the past. To be continued on Tuesday.
Thank you, Ms. Dorner, and thank you for your kind words to the Commission. The Commissioners work very hard. Any further comments from members of the audience for verbal communications? Seeing no one come forward, I will go to item number 1, which is a consent item, and that is approval of the minutes for August 24th of 2016. Do I have a motion to approve? Commissioner Birch.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes of August 24th.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Hanson.
I second.
Any discussion? I will add that I was recused from item number 2, but viewed the hearing and can attest to the accuracy of the minutes. I will now call the question. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Item number 3, 125 Wheeler Avenue, our first public hearing of the evening. And that is architecture and site application S-16-039, requesting approval to demolish an existing single-family residence and to construct a new single-family residence on property zoned R-18, APN 532-36-065. Ms. Puga, I understand will be providing us with the staff report this evening.
That's correct. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. On August 24th, the Planning Commission considered an application for a new 2,587 square foot two-story home. Concerns with the application were raised by the adjacent neighbors regarding neighborhood compatibility, setbacks, privacy, grading, and cellar area. At the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant proposed 3 modifications to address the concerns of the adjacent neighbors. The applicant proposed to reduce the building height by 2 feet to 26 feet 6 inches, to utilize Dutch gable roof forms, and to relocate the second floor bedroom window to the front elevation. The Planning Commission continued the application to allow the applicant and adjacent neighbors additional time to review the proposed changes. The adjacent neighbors and the applicant were able to meet and discuss the proposed changes and were agreeable to the building height reduction and the second floor bedroom relocation. Letters discussing this meeting are included as Exhibits 22 and 24. The applicant is no longer proposing the Dutch gable roof forms due to modified ceiling heights. However, the setbacks of the proposed residence, shadow impacts, and loss of visible sky remain outstanding concerns of the adjacent neighbors. Written comments discussing these concerns are included as Exhibits 24 and 25. The applicant has responded to some of these concerns, in addition to those raised at the previous meeting, and those are included in Exhibits 21, 22, and 23. Staff recommends approval of the application based on its compliance with the residential design guidelines and neighborhood compatibility with regards to setbacks, mass, and FAR. There is a desk item before you this evening which contains a letter from the property owner. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are happy to assist the Commission with any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Puga. Questions for staff from Commissioners? Commissioner Hudes.
I may have missed what happened with the Dutch gable. Could you walk me through that? Because I know in some correspondence, I saw that the applicant was requesting Dutch gable.
The applicant had proposed the Dutch gables, and that's included in Exhibit 20, what they had provided at the Planning Commission meeting. And they are no longer proposing it because it modified ceiling heights in the bedrooms. Staff didn't receive any correspondence from the adjacent neighbors that they had concerns with the removal of this proposal.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I am reopening the public testimony of the hearing from August 24th due to a revision of the plans, and I invite Mr. Jeans and his team, if he has one with him, to address the commission for up to 10 minutes.
Commissioners. So basically, what have we done in the last 3 weeks? I'm going to go through this. We took the opportunity to meet with the Greens. We also worked with staff on construction and traffic parking measures. There are some modifications to conditions based on requests from other neighbors, and we've incorporated those by modifying the conditions, which you can look at. We submitted the charts that you requested previously as overheads. We'd last time shown them as overheads, and I believe Mr. Kane felt that it would help if they had time, if you had time to review them. We also flushed out trees because a number of neighbors had concerns about the trees that we would be planting, so we flushed that out. And then we incorporated the changes presented as red lines into the plans, with the exception of the Dutch gable, in part because of the ceiling. We have only a 7-foot plate height upstairs in order to keep the height down. And when you clip the Dutch gable at the front, you end up with no real room. Also, several neighbors felt that the Craftsman look was much more compatible with the neighborhood, and that the Dutch gables made it look more like Glenridge. So we felt that we did not want to go that way. So I'm going to go through some of these. I'm just going to deal with a couple of the charts. This chart specifically concerns setbacks. Now, it is on the neighborhood compatibility chart or table that you have in your packet, and the large one on the wall. But when you look at the north side of Wheeler, I'm not considering the south side. There are some smaller homes and apartments there. But if you look at the north side of Wheeler, you see that you have a series of 8-foot setbacks at 129 Wheeler, 127 Wheeler, 119 Wheeler has an 8 and a 15, and 242 Los Gatos Boulevard has a 4. So we really feel that the 8-foot setback is highly compatible in this neighborhood, and that there is no reason to try to modify it. We did, however, try to modify it, but the only way that we can do that, because of the shape of the lot and the requirements of my clients, is to turn it sideways and make it lengthways on the lot, and that brings 3 other neighbors into play who support the project as it is now, but will object to it if we rotate it and move it over. So that's where we stand on that. Size, you've probably had a chance to look at. If you have questions on it, I will answer them. But basically, we're the 5th largest FAR, and we do have a cellar, but we have depressed the house into the ground, so the cellar has come out of the picture. It's not contributing to mass. And in fact, the neighboring home to the left is in exactly the same position with our 1,500 square foot cellar. They have a 2,100 square foot cellar, and their house doesn't look massive So again, cellar should not be an issue. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have actually done. You have these in your set of plans, and I've taken a little bit of sheet A4.0, which is the front elevation, and I've taken a section from 4.1, which is the right elevation. So let's talk about the front elevation first. So we have dropped the whole house 2 feet. And what you'll see is that we don't have steps up to the porch. We've pushed it down, so we've settled it down the same way that the neighboring houses appear from the street. We've also been able to take 2 feet out of the height. It's interesting because when I met with the Greens, they said the height reduction didn't really help them. So if you feel we don't need to reduce the height, we won't reduce it. So, however, we are offering that, and I think it's appropriate. We've gone through this process to work with everyone, and the 2 foot reduction is on the table, and this is what we're proposing. We do not want to clip these and turn them into Boston gables for the reasons that I've already stated. If you look in detail at the site plan, you'll see that we have called out the names of the trees because the neighbor over here, Jason, said he wanted some larger format trees here. So we're actually proposing a couple more redwoods. There is a redwood here. I don't really favor redwoods in the downtown environment, but with one redwood, there already having 2 additional redwoods next to it is not inappropriate. There are a number of other redwoods in the neighborhood. On the other side of the property, we're proposing matins, and if you look further in, I think, Exhibit 22, you've got some photographs of those trees. This is the revised grading plan showing that we've actually reduced the finished floor of the house by 2 feet, adjusted the front grade, and we can still arrange for the water to drain to the street. If we reduce it anymore, we end up with a swamp and we end up with water going onto the neighboring properties. But we do believe that we've actually solved we still have solved the drainage issue. There is no drainage that runs off onto any of the neighboring properties, and I think in the meeting with the Greens that they were relatively happy over that aspect of the project. So that's the final house when you see it as a rendering and not just the form that you see in a set of plans. I think it looks very compatible. It, according to the words of the town consulting architect, fits well into the neighborhood. And the fact that the second story massing has been reduced by incorporating the second story into the roof line makes a big difference. This is the new gable that has removed the window from the right-hand elevation. It used to be there. It used to be a privacy issue. It is no longer. We've now moved it around here. So if you do look at the page that I already showed, you can see here where it was facing the Greens house. Now it has moved around the corner, and the second story is actually from there to there, buried inside the roof. So we've done everything we can to reduce massing. We believe that the size is appropriate, the FAR is appropriate, and we ask you to consider approving it. If you have questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Jeans. We have a question for you. I'm going to start with Vice Chair Kane, followed by Commissioner Hudes, followed by Commissioner Hanson.
Mr. Jeans, the information provided in Exhibit 21 with the charts that you were just demonstrating was exceedingly helpful. They were clear, simple. I understood them, radical, and I thank you for them. My question is back to the exhibit showing the outline of the project from above. In the backyard, there is this, to me, a majestic palm. Is there no way to save that tree?
Right in the front yard?
Oh, the back one. It's about 40, 50 feet.
Right. It's in front of the existing house, and it is about 2 feet from the front of the new house. And look, I think the answer is no, but I think when it was younger, it was appropriate. It was probably the wrong palm, the wrong choice of palm, because it is so tall for that and is a little bit out of keeping.
It's extraordinary. You mentioned planting redwoods, and I would defer to staff and ask, would you consider, as we develop this discussion, would you consider appropriate trees other than redwoods?
Absolutely. And we had not called out definitively that it had to be a redwood. In the listing, we've said large format trees, but we did suggest redwoods only because there is a redwood, as you know, that's already on the neighbor's house just in this location here. So with that being a redwood, they tend to go well in groups of 3, and we felt that this was not causing any shadowing on the neighboring house. It wasn't causing shadowing here, but we're more than willing to look at alternatives. The Maton, for example, that we're using over on the other side, we could also replicate there.
Yeah, this is minor, and I digress. It was the group of 3 that concerned me. If the town arborist was here, I would ask him, because he schooled me on groups of 3 in the past. Actually, they have the potential to create a wind blockage, which puts more strain on the redwoods. They soak up water. I used to like them, and the more I learn about them, the more I think, well, they're not indigenous, and if we can find an alternative, as you said, we would pursue that.
I would like to talk to Jason across the street, who was the person who asked not for redwoods but for large format trees, and if we can reach an agreement with him as for an alternative, I have no problem with that at all.
My last question is on the crux of the matter, the proposed 8-foot setback. In your response to that, you indicated it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to maintain the integrity of the design, due in part to the elevator. And I was thinking, well, that's persuasive. I wish I could understand it better. Would you elaborate on what would happen if you increased that setback?
I would have to, in order to keep the house relatively short, which I'm trying to do, you have to keep it as far from square as possible and make it longer, because if you have a longer house, it's narrower and the roof doesn't go up so high. So that's point 1. So I'm trying to keep it short. In the designs that we considered, we have a garage on the right, which has 21 feet as a requirement. We have an elevator next to it, which is 5 feet. We have stairs, and we have a room. When you add all those together, you end up with something that does not allow you to increase that setback to more than perhaps 9 feet, which really would not mean anything. The Greens originally wanted the house to be left in the same position where it is now, which is 19-foot setback, with and they proposed that we set back the second story to 27 feet. So they're dictating there a house which goes lengthways along the lot, and when you do that, you have no rear yard. And in fact, in the exhibit that I showed last time, which I don't remember which number it was, but I showed what would happen if we rotated it. And it showed that you wipe out the backyard, and in wiping out the backyard, you cause a problem with the flag lot behind at 127, who is currently very upset about the house that he's having to live behind now, and really likes what we're doing in moving it forward, because the flag lot situation, as you know, is really difficult to work around. So we are helping them out. We also, if we
Mr. Jeans, I'm going to have to stop you here because I think the question was answered about the 8-foot setback, and we've got commissioners that also have questions.
All right.
I agree. Thank you.
Commissioner Hudis.
I have two areas of questions. The first one's on design, and it makes sense that the gables have been removed at the ends of the roof if you're trying to keep a craftsman design, and I think that style is compatible with the neighborhood. I'm a little curious about the columns on the front facade. Are they consistent with craftsman style as well?
Yes, and in fact, we changed those to reflect what the town consulting architect wanted. I think Jocelyn will be able to find the actual comment, but if you read the report from the town consulting architect, we had slightly more slender columns. These would be square columns, not round columns. So I think you might be seeing them visually as a round column, but we have a large format square column. And if you imagine it that way, then I think it is compatible with Craftsman. As a round column, I agree with you, it would not be.
Okay, thank you. That helps to clarify. My second question is on neighborhood compatibility. And on the chart that you've provided in Exhibit 21, that is comparing the FAR and the house size to the immediate neighborhood. So are you familiar with the neighborhood design guidelines that refer to and define the immediate neighborhood by explicitly saying it's 2, 2, and 5, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and the 5 across the street, 227 for a corner home?
Unfortunately, yes, I am.
Okay. So the fact that you've only got 5 instead of the 9, could you explain that to me? And I believe that those are guidelines, and I believe that there are reasons sometimes, why. But I want to make sure that we're not in a situation where, we're just selecting or cherry picking certain homes in order to come up with an answer. And so explicitly, I guess, there are some even-numbered homes that seem to be excluded from the other side of the street, 120, 136, 142, 160.
Yes,
could you
absolutely.
explain how they're located and why that
Okay.
we don't follow the 225?
Okay. I have them all shown on the neighborhood study. So everything is shown there, including the setbacks, and you have that in your plan. However, I felt that what I was trying to do was show you, the commissioners, that there were other homes in the area that had 8-foot setbacks. And I felt that if I showed you 2 or 3 homes in the immediate neighborhood which have 8-foot setbacks, then that should be sufficient to justify having an 8-foot setback. If I showed the other houses on the other side of the street, those are smaller homes, they're older homes, and those have not got 8-foot setbacks, except one of them has 10 and 5 on one side. But I wasn't cherry picking, I was just showing you the new homes which are on the north side of the street. The older homes on the other side of the street don't follow that format. and have greater than 10-foot setbacks. They're shown on my survey. I wasn't cherry picking. I was just trying to show you there are a lot of houses in the neighborhood with 8-foot setbacks.
Well, I appreciate that, but my question was not about the setbacks. It was about the FAR and the size as indicated on the chart. So what you're representing that this is the
fifth largest FAR.
But it only looks at 5 other homes. If it were to look at, did you do the 225 analysis?
I did, but it's still the 5th largest.
It's still the 5th largest.
So
okay.
if you bring in the houses on the other side of the street and the apartment complex you have to ignore, but if you bring in the other houses on the street, those are all smaller, but it's still the 5th largest FAR. It doesn't change the fact that it's the 5th largest FAR, and maybe the 3rd or 4th largest house, I don't know. So I was only trying to show you where it fits in that, and you would have 3 or 4 smaller homes below that if you were to do the whole picture. And I did not show that there because I was trying to show it was the 5th largest and not the largest. So I had to show you the ones that were bigger.
Okay, thank you. I got it.
That was it.
Commissioner Hanson?
I had a similar line of questioning to Commissioner Kane about the setbacks. But here's what I was specifically looking at. I'm looking at your chart C3 in your plans, where you have all the houses. And the 8-foot setback is the requirement. But I'm kind of looking at there's property line to property line, and then there's where the house is relative to the property line. So, for example, in the case of your house and the house next door that's contesting this, the houses are really right close together. The house on the other side, 119 Wheeler, there's a driveway in between for the flag lot, plus some additional space, and so the 8 feet isn't a practical 8 feet. It is by code definition, but if you're looking at some of these things, there's space. And if you look at the house on the other side of 129, they have an 8-foot setback relative to the property line, but the house is way far over, maybe 15 or I can't tell exactly how many feet. And so I come back to where, and I think this is the direction of the commission the last time, is it would be great to have a compromise. You can't always make everyone happy, and I had the same question as Commissioner Kane. Is there some way to move that house over just a little bit more, even if it was a little taller? I didn't hear that you said that the neighbors didn't have any objection to the height. I just wondered if that wasn't the thing that could make this thing work for both of you.
Well, if you look at the 15 concerns that they had originally, we've resolved most of them. And that is in one of my exhibits. It's either the first page of Exhibit 21 or 22. There are sometimes things that we have to ask you to adjudicate on. And I have tried, and I do try. I do lots of homes in Los Gatos. And I try and work with neighbors, and it's very rare that I have to come to you because of a neighbor issue. If you look at the house on the right-hand side, this is This is 129. This is the subject property. This is a half-acre property. It will be split. It will be split. When this house is sold, 2 houses will go there. And there is your future lot line. And it could go the other way, but if you look at the street on the north side of Wheeler, when you put that house there, what you're going to have is 8 foot, 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 4 foot, and a 15. That is the way that neighborhood is going when you look at when this house sells, because there is no way that this house will stay as a single house on this lot. So I want you to do two things. I want you to look at the fact that the existing house is 8 foot, 8 foot. And I don't believe that it should be, we got there first, therefore you should move away from us. I don't believe that is what the guidelines say. And I see that as the way the neighborhood is going.
Okay, Mr. Jeans, I think the question was answered. Thank you very much. Commissioner Birch.
I'm just going to ask a couple quick questions because I know we're not finished with public testimony. We want to get there. Mine is very loud. I'll move back. Mr. Jeans, how many times between the last meeting and this meeting did you have an opportunity to speak with the neighbors?
We had one meeting
Okay.
that covered a wide range of topics, and then based on that meeting, I went away to finish revising the plans.
That's good.
That was it.
My second question, in the 8-foot setback that we keep talking about, are you asking for a variance to any of our guidelines or an exemption?
No, in fact, we're significantly less
Okay.
than your guidelines on
That's all I need.
everything except.
Thank you. Question answered.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Jeans. I will
Thank
now
you.
be inviting comments from members of the public. And my first card is Estelle Green.
Hi, my name's Estelle Green and I'm from 129 Wheeler Avenue. During our last meeting, there was discussion about our house being the same size as the proposed house. We would like to clarify, and this is actually a rough visual of our house on their lot. So as you can see, our house is significantly smaller, and since we have more square footage on our first floor, there's even less visual bulk impact than the footprint represented here. In fact, the proposed house is almost 200% larger than ours. So you can see here in every category it's significantly larger in size. So there's simply no comparison. To be precise, they are 2,514 square feet larger than our house. And we understand that the city only includes this top section in the FAR. But if you look below, you will notice that 50%, or 2,586 square feet, of the proposed square footage is not included in the FAR calculation. That's basically a house within a house. For perspective, when you compare that to our house, 129 Wheeler has only 16% of its total square footage not included in the FAR. And this is why we are asking for relief from the bulk, scale and mass of the house. As you can see in this diagram, we are the only neighbour impacted in such an inconsiderate manner from the proposed plans. At our last meeting, there was an incorrect discussion regarding neighbour proximity. We want to be clear. These are the distances between structures for all directly affected neighbours. It's no wonder they are in approval. They amount approximately to 43 to 50 feet at 119 Wheeler, 46 feet at 2 Charles and 38 feet at 127 Wheeler, and we are only 16 feet. Why is every other neighbour protected by the Los Gatos 2020 General Plan except us? The distances for everyone else also represents what staff has classified as low density for our area, except us. This proximity is now setting a dangerous precedent for high density in our small area. The proposed plan does not follow this guideline, it ignores it, and others. Every neighbour deserves to be protected equally, but this 5,172 square foot house imposes on us more than any other neighbour. You can't design something with sensitivity and awareness to only some neighbours. The proposed plans deny our home access to Skyview's sun access, and we just want to ask, how is this plan sensitive? We want the same protections and considerations given to every other neighbour. The existing home at 125 Wheeler, due to its reasonable 27-foot setback, has no impact on our sky views or shadows. Of course, a 27-foot setback would be ideal, but in the spirit of being sensitive to the villas, we would like to compromise and request a 16-foot setback from the property line. We feel this is more than reasonable and represents less than half of what the closest neighbour
Thank
has
you.
at
Thank you, Ms.
38
Green.
feet.
Thank you. Do we have questions from commissioners? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Catherine Morgan. And when you arrive at the podium, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Catherine Morgan, 142 Wheeler Avenue. Just two things. One is the community design guidelines were designed to protect the whole community, not just the newest, biggest half of it. That is their whole point, to protect the traditional neighborhood, as its words are. Secondly, it does not require that the whole house be flipped around, wiping out the back lot to the flag lot that should never have been approved in the first place, but there it is. It calls for larger setbacks and smaller rooms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Adam Green.
My name is Adam Green from 129 Wheeler Avenue. I'm going to do some myth busting related to a number of errors with the facts and figures presented for the 125 plans. First, I'd like to look at one of the examples at 119 Wheeler Avenue in the lower left, which the applicant is using as a reference. Each house here has an 8-foot setback from the property line. However, those are only for garages. What is notable is that the living quarters on the second floor of 119 have an additional 8 to 10 foot setback from the edge of the garage. The detached garage at 262 Los Gatos, which you can see in the upper left, is single story, and the living area of the house has an additional setback at approximately 64 feet from the structure to structure. You can't even necessarily see the structure on this slide. Although 8-foot setbacks are used, this design doesn't block sky views for 119 and is sensitive to the neighbors. Now let's focus on the proposed property area. Note the flag lot offers a 20-foot buffer, as we've noted, between the structures, and you'll see that 119 Wheeler has a 16-foot setback on their property line, giving a total of 43 feet from structure to structure. 2 Charles is very similar, and 127 Wheeler, which is at the top right, which is the flag lot, is 30 feet from our den and even further at about 68 feet from the rest of our house. And when you look at the close proximity of the proposed structure on the west side of our house, it basically blocks sky access for 3 of our rooms. Recently, Mr. James graciously came by to show us the modifications to the plans, lowering it to the ground by another 2 feet. We all sort of laughed because sitting at our dining room table, we still couldn't see the story pole netting due to the close 8-foot setback. We also find it confusing that the applicant continues to state that there is no impact on sky views. The best way to gauge the impact is to view the poles from inside our home, and the Planning Commission has an open invitation. Here are some pictures to remind you what our views will look like if this application is approved. This is our den, dining room, and our kitchen. It's a wall of siding. So as you can see, this application simply violates too many of the Los Gatos planning guidelines to be approved in its current form. These guidelines serve to enhance our quality of life and enhance our property values. They exist to protect all of us, and not only protects the community, but gives developers clear rules and guidance to build responsibly in Los Gatos. Overbuilding ultimately hurts all of us. We have no problem with reasonable growth and development and are not opposed to construction. We are not asking you to permanently say no to our neighbors' development. We would like them to come back with a redesigned plan that is sensitive to all neighbors equally and protects the community. Thank you.
Mr. Green, Do you have full sky views on the east, north, and south sides of your home? So it's only the west side that's affected?
The east side only has, I believe, one window and a guest room. So that's actually, to be honest, if they were building on that side, we probably wouldn't be here. That's the side we don't use. The side that has the most amount of light comes in on the west side, and all of our windows and all of our sky views are from the west side.
Okay,
we do have obviously a porch in the back, but completely, because of the proximity and the size, it's completely blocking a number of rooms.
Okay, but from three sides of your home, you do have solar access and you have sky views.
We don't have windows on all sides, but yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Hudes?
Thank you, and I very much appreciate the diagrams, and your photographs helped. I didn't have to go to your living room to see the story poles. It's very, very clear. I had a few questions, and I'm referring to Mr. Jean's Exhibit 21 because it, at least in one place, kind of lists 15 comments and concerns, and I just wanted to focus on a couple of them. With regard to the house looming over and overshadowing 129, and his comment is that the house is now 2 feet shorter. Are you familiar with the height of the proposed 125 and the height of your home at 129?
I believe they dropped it to 28 feet?
And are you familiar with the height of your home?
28.
About the same?
I'm not sure, yeah. It's probably about the same.
Okay, thank you. The other question was about privacy issues, and I wonder if those still remain for you. The issue, Mr. Jean states that the privacy issue of the second story has been resolved with the relocation of the side window to the front. Has that relieved any or all of your privacy issues?
We appreciate the move of the window, absolutely. We appreciate what Mr. Jeans has done so far. I don't think the largest issue has been addressed, which is the density of the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Thank you. And then the last one was about trees. And do you have a concern about too many trees on the side of 129? And do you have an opinion about the type of tree that's being proposed?
On the side of 125.
Well, between 129 and 125.
I think the main issue when we're looking at a very tight 8 foot on each side is planting a large tree. Obviously, it grows and it goes all over the other property, and depending upon what tree it is, whether leaves fall or whatnot, you end up picking up all your neighbors, all of that, all of the leaves and whatnot.
So the proposal is to plant a particular arbor vitae emerald green hedging. Is that acceptable to you? Have you reviewed that?
Yeah, Mr. Jeans came over. We were fine with, I think, most of what he proposed. I think the redwoods in the front were one of the only concerns. I think our neighbor across the street had some questions on that, whether redwoods are appropriate. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, those are very, very low on the list of concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Green? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mr. Jeans is invited back to the podium for 5 minutes to provide further comments. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a speaker card from Lee Quintana. We'll get back to it shortly, Mr. Jeans.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I haven't had a chance to look at this application in detail. I just got back from vacation. However, I would like to reiterate what the general plan says, that sellers are encouraged in lieu of visible square footage or visible mass. And what I understand is that the FAR of the proposed house is close to the maximum, or maybe even reaches the maximum. So with such a large cellar, doubling the size of the house, I don't see how that cellar is used to reduce the visible mass. Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Mr. Jeans.
I'll first of all answer a question. Adam Green said that the house that we are proposing has just been reduced to 28 feet. It's actually reduced from 28'6" to 26'6", and he is correct in saying that his house is 28. So we're now 1.5 feet shorter than the house to the right. And while we're on that subject, I will show you a marked up version of the plan that Mr. Green showed you. This is one of the upper windows that had a direct line of sight. That has been resolved by moving that around here. So the front two windows in the master bedroom don't even look at the house. The roof goes up that way, so there is nothing on any of the windows facing here. He has full solar access. This room is the main living room, family room, the one they hang out in. They have a window here, which I think they've taken a picture from. They have a window here, here, and here, and their main yard is there. Their focus is in this direction, and they also look out in that direction there. That is the focus of their living. To block a view from a kitchen sink window and a window in this location here, I don't think is a big deal. I mean, I really think that this has been blown out of proportion. If other houses did not have 8-foot setbacks, if their house did not have 8-foot setbacks, I would be designing a different house. But I do believe that it's very much in keeping with the 8-foot setbacks behind, beside, and some of the others. Also, the comment about a large second story, we don't. We have a small second story. This is the second story profile. I'm going to put up the two pictures that Mr. Green put up. There's the first one. I think it's a little disingenuous when they just wipe out all of the greenery and put siding there. We have proposed putting trees here that are evergreen so that they will not shed. They're narrow format so that they won't intrude. And we think that this kitchen sink window is really being shown at its absolute worst, and we think it could be a lot better if we're allowed to plant trees along the side. We did say that we would only plant trees along that side if the Greens agree. Otherwise, we won't plant them. I also really don't like the fact that, and you can see it more clearly in your packet, but what they've done is they've come round and taken this angle, taken this shot at a very oblique angle to really try and maximize this roof. If you can see, you see all of the side, all of the casing down here, you see none of it down this side. If you look straight forward, you don't even see that degree of house. You see a much lower roof and one that can be screened with 15-foot, not trees, but shrubs, tall shrubs. So I really want you to give that serious consideration. I will come back to this plan, which again is the north side of the street, and I'm not apologizing for that. It's the north side of the street, and you have a 4-foot setback here, an 8-foot setback here. Whether this is a garage or not, it's still a setback. This is not a garage. This is living space. So there's a 15. But you have 8-foot setbacks, 8-foot setbacks, and that's what we're asking for, because to do it differently, we're going to upset 3 neighbors. And if you look at exhibit, I think it was 18 last time, you have neighbors who have said that they will support the project. There you are. This is the neighborhood support from the project. All of these neighbors have sent you letters of support for this project. They're in your packet.
Thank you, Mr. Jeans.
Have one neighbor.
Thank you. Thank you. We have the letters in our packet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Jeans? Commissioner Birch.
So to verify, I'm looking at C3, and I'm looking at, as Commissioner Hudas had pointed out, as best we can, the 5 across the street, the 2 on each side, and I want to make sure that my counts are correct. I'm counting out of that particular dynamic of homes, 6 of the other homes are 2-story. Am I 6 within the 9 are 2-story? Am I correct? I'm kind of looking at our staff for that. It's 6 or 7, kind of depending which ones you count. But am I counting correct?
I believe it's
7 or
7.
8.
7. Okay. Can I just ask one
Of course.
question?
Go ahead, Commissioner Birch.
I appreciate what you've done with lowering the house. I think that has been very helpful in demonstrating. I did want to ask if, in doing all of this, if you've also been in contact with the neighbors behind and reassured again that they are approving of the project as you have submitted. I haven't heard anything from those neighbors. I've just heard what you've had to say, but I'd like reassurance on that.
Okay, then it is the neighbors behind who have sent letters. And the neighbors all around and across the street. And we have been in touch with them. They have no, they're happy that we lowered it another 2 feet. Apart from that, they said, great, we like it. We think it fits in well.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Jeans.
Thank you.
The public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions, comments, or a motion? I've got a question for staff if nobody has their hand up. So, can you elaborate for us on the difference in the sky view and visible building mass from a distance of what might be seen from 8 feet compared to 16 feet? Would it be a big difference? Would it be drastic? Would it help? Would it be negligible?
We don't have, and I will look to Ms. Puga if she has some additional input, but we don't have any depiction of what that would look like. Obviously, an additional 8 feet is just going to move, for an example, what the Greens showed from their photos. It moves that back. You may gain a little bit if you're looking up. The farther you pull it back, obviously, at that angle, you would gain some additional sky view, but we don't have anything concrete to show definitive, and obviously the severity or lessening of that impact would be dependent on the person viewing that.
So is it your opinion that there would be building mass that would still be visible?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Hudas.
Following up to a question I asked of Mr. Jeans, referring to Exhibit 21, the second page there, that attempts to show the size and FAR in comparison to the immediate neighborhood. This chart looks incomplete, that there are only 5 that are listed. Did staff look at the additional 4 previously? Because I know this has been before us a couple of times.
Sure. If you look at page 4 of the original Planning Commission report from August 24th, we provide a full immediate neighborhood comparison of square footages and FAR.
And where does this one fall?
In our calculations, it is the 3rd largest with regards to square footage and 3rd largest with regards to FAR.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Birch.
I'm going to venture a motion. I'm going to move to approve architectural and site application S-16-039, requesting approval to demolish an existing single-family residence and construct a new single-family residence on property zoned R-18. I can find that the property is categorically exempt. I can find the requirements of section 29.10.09030E of the Town Code for demolition of a single-family residence. As required by the residential design guidelines, that the project complies with the residential design guidelines, and as required by section 29.20.150 of the Town Code for granting approval of an architectural and site application. And just to follow that, I'm making this motion based on the fact that while there's been some discussion about setbacks and height, this project falls in line with the neighborhood. When we look at the immediate neighborhood and we look at compatibility, the bulk of the homes are two-story. The height, as we just had confirmation from staff, both the FAR is the third largest. It is not the largest in the neighborhood. It is not the tallest in the neighborhood. So I feel like I can support this application.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I will second that, but I want to ask the maker of the motion, since certain conditions are incorporated, which are basically attached, but we also had some discussion of some other conditions which were arrived at after our last meeting, and even that has changed somewhat. Are they reflected in an attachment?
So the modified conditions on page 5 of the staff report with regards to engineering, they're not included in the conditions of approval in Exhibit 19. So if you wish, you could make a motion to include those.
So I would just ask the maker of the motion, if that is her intent, to include those additional conditions. And she said yes.
Yes, it is.
So my second would stand.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second discussion, and I will look to Vice Chair Kane for a discussion.
Well, Commissioner O'Donnell said what I was going to say. That Exhibit 19 does include everything that we've talked about today. And Exhibit 19 is a revision from what? Exhibit 3? So Exhibit 3 doesn't apply anymore. 19 does. And I don't think 19 has a couple of things in it. Mr. Jeans asked if we were willing to accept the height reduction. I certainly am, if the maker of the motion is, and the seconder. He made a number of comments in his August 24th letter, where he used a lot of red ink, in other words, delineating his response, where he would be amendable to certain requests on modification of this and that. Ms. Johnson, were these included in Exhibit 19, or should we submit them as supplemental to the motion?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. This is an unmarked exhibit. It drove me crazy. I couldn't find a place to put it. But it's the letter dated August 24. And Mr. Jeans is responding to a number of concerns on parking and construction. And I saw some parking and construction vehicles in the Exhibit 19, but I didn't know if all of these were included.
So the parking construction concerns are included on page 5 of the staff report. And so those are the conditions that Commissioner O'Donnell included in his
I'd like
motion.
to pass these over to the maker of the motion to see if there's anything here of interest. And while she's doing that, well, I don't know that they are.
She just said it was.
Parking was. He's got other items on there. There was a letter submitted by Jason Goulden August 24th, and again, it didn't have an exhibit number on it. I'm sorry. But it talks about the applicant has agreed to the following. Subcontractors park on Whitney. Okay. Include 2 street threes and tree medium. I think that was handled. Lower the grade and lower the proposed structure by 2 feet. That was handled. He goes on to say, and this is for staff, not for the maker of the motion, or maybe it should be, I don't know. But I'm asking staff, Mr. Goulden concluded with, whereas we are in favor of the project, I'm paraphrasing, he said we would also like to request that the town consider a 3-way stop sign at the Wheeler-Whitney intersection. This is a dangerous location to have no traffic controls. When I walk the neighborhood, I wouldn't disagree with him, but rather than have this be argued into the motion or not, could staff look into that?
We have PPW staff here this evening. That's not going to be part of this project, but we will make sure that they make note of that and reach out to Mr. Goulden.
Again, the source is his letter of August 24. Thank you.
Commissioner Birch.
Just in response to reading this, it does look like most of this was captured. The last one, Ms. Puga, that I wasn't sure about is condition 68. And the note that Mr. Jeans had said is a sanitary sewer cleanout is required for each property at the property line or at a location specified by the town. I don't know if that actually needs to be put in the conditions because I think that's a standard requirement anyways.
That's correct.
Okay. So otherwise they are captured.
I agree with the speaker regarding concerns over the intent of the cellar policy. However, the house next door at 119 Wheeler has an even larger cellar, and both the homes at 129 and 119 Wheeler have 8-foot side setbacks. So I will be supporting the motion. Further discussion? Vice Chair Kane?
I would echo on the cellar policy what we have said before to staff, that we're seeking clarification on the strength, the limits, the concept of in lieu of visible mass. We're getting a lot of cases where that's coming up, and if you could request council or a subcommittee body to take a second look at that and try to be more specific. Thank you.
As stated before, that is in the works, and that will be going back to the policy committee and then ultimately back to the council, and pending their direction back to the planning commission and then back to the council.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
I'm not going to be supporting the motion because I do think that that when you look at the situation, there's a number of neighbors, and I realize that the applicant is sandwiched in between them, and I know that the setbacks are set as they are. But as I mentioned earlier, if you kind of look at the actual house to house, and the neighbors at 129 Wheeler are going to be suffering the most in terms of this new house, and considering the idea about the cellar reducing the bulk and mass above ground, I still feel there's a way to make this work better for the neighbors next door.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-1. Commissioner Hanson opposed. Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights of the actions of the commission on this item?
There are appeal rights. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the planning commission can appeal that decision to the town council. The forms are available in the clerk's office. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Thank you. Item number 4, 105 Newell Avenue, Plan Development Application PD-14-002. Mitigated Negative Declaration ND-16-002, requesting approval of a planned development to rezone a property from R112 to R112 PD, to demolish an existing building and construct 4 single residences on property zoned R112. APN 409-24-026. May I have a show of hands from the commissioners who have visited the site? Are there any disclosures from commissioners? We're still gathering speaker cards, so I'll give it a moment before we're ready to receive the staff report. Thank you. Thank you for the speaker cards. Ms. Armour, I understand that you'll be providing us with the staff report this evening?
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. The project in front of you this evening is a proposal to build 4 new homes on the site currently occupied by the Elks Lodge. The site is at the corner of Newell Avenue and Winchester Boulevard. The project site is a sloped corner lot of approximately 1.4 acres. With residential on 2 sides and the aforementioned streets on the other 2. The 4 proposed homes would be 2 stories, and 2 of them have alternative floor plans, which include kind of an in-law unit, a secondary dwelling unit as a possibility. The proposed planned development zone would include numerous exceptions to the underlying R112 zoning regulations. The proposal to redevelop the site was first seen by the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee in December 11th of 2013. The proposal at that point, there were two different proposals that were included. One of them was an 11 attached residential condo units. The other was 5 single-family residential units. One of the primary elements that the applicant heard at that meeting was a concern over the density and intensity of the uses that were proposed. And so they decided to go for the single-family residential version or idea for redevelopment, and they went from 5 units down to 4. The application was submitted approximately 6 months later in July of 2014. And then over the following year, they had 5 different staff technical review meetings, coming back to work with town staff over technical issues, resubmittals. In the middle of that process, there was also review by the architectural consultant, the town's architectural consultant and the town's arborist. Both were provided review in February of 2015. So that was about 6 months after the formal submittal. And then their final staff technical review was actually last July, at which point, even though there were still some unresolved technical issues, the applicant decided that they wished to move forward with the review. And with advice from staff, they did decide to conduct the environmental review so that there was an opportunity to have a decision rather than having the application reverted back to staff for environmental review. So a draft initial study and mitigated negative declaration was prepared in the first half of this year, was available for public review from June 17th to July 7th of 2016, and is now before you along with the proposed PD zone. Staff's concerns that are still detailed in the staff report. There are a number of different concerns. The main ones fall into 3 categories. The first being details that are left unresolved from the staff reviews. Issues like the height measurement in Lot 4 that was done incorrectly was shown differently. And these are items that could potentially be addressed through the plan development, through specific exceptions, or through the architecture and site review process. Second category of main concern is the grading and retaining walls that are proposed, the depth of the cut and fill, and non-compliance with the hillside design guidelines that do apply. Certain categories, including the grading section of those guidelines, do apply to this lot because it is greater than 10% slope. Also, that includes a section that discusses maintaining the existing landform, where the proposal goes a pretty far way in trying to create flat parcels for the 4 developed houses, 4 proposed houses. And then the third category that is of concern from staff is neighborhood compatibility. Both the proposed 2-story character of the homes, which is out of character with the immediate neighborhood, as well as the floor area, the total proposed square footage of the homes, which is significantly larger than the next largest home in the existing immediate neighborhood. Based on these concerns, as well as those included in the written staff report, staff recommends that the Commission forward the plan development application to the Town Council with a recommendation for denial. This concludes staff's presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the report, Ms. Armour. Questions for staff? Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you for your report. I had a couple of questions quickly. One of the guidelines for approving the current plan development, not the ordinance that we're hopefully revising to, it's not approved yet, but is to take in consideration open space. So my question was, how much open space is there now? I mean, I actually used to run on that lot. We did hill running, but it's a parking lot with the Elks Lodge. How much open space is there now, and how much would there be with the proposal as we know it? I'm
going to recommend that we take that question to the applicant when they have the opportunity to speak. But there isn't, beyond, the front yards and the private driveway, there isn't a whole lot of open space that's proposed. The existing site is predominantly the single building and the parking lot as well. So,
okay, well, so we can come back to that. Quick question. A second question. It's quick as well. Have we ever allowed a planned development with this level of grading, cut and fill, flattening the hill, basically?
I think it's a distinction between quantity, so there's probably many that have had similar quantities, depths of cut and fill since the new hillside development standards and guidelines were adopted, probably not, but quantity, surely we've had projects that have had the quantity of cut and fill that this project would propose.
The volume of yards, okay. And then last question, is the town arborist here tonight?
They are not.
Because my question was, when I was reading her report, she only recommended to keep one tree, but her recommendation was based on construction impacts, and this isn't approved as a plan development or as an architecture and site application. So I would have wanted to know what trees she would have wanted to save, period, versus with construction. And so maybe if we have all our questions answered, that maybe there's a way to get the answer later.
So one option there is obviously you'll be making a recommendation moving forward to council when you decide to make that recommendation. Should that happen this evening, then that could be direction, and we can get that answer prior to the council taking a final action.
Thank you.
Commissioner Birch, followed by Commissioner Hudes, followed by Vice Chair Kane.
Thank you so much for the detailed staff report. So I'm going to apologize that I'm about to ask a redundant question. Just for the sake of conversation, one of the things that you noted at first was there was a number of exemptions that we're asking for. Can you list those out for us?
Sure. And part of the list of exceptions is based on things that they are specifically asking for, and some are based on things that were left unresolved from the staff technical meetings, and therefore were incorporated here because that is what's being proposed in the current set of plans. So the plan development section of your staff report, page 5, lists the proposed, that's the PD application. Page 13. There we go. Page 13. The exceptions would include reduced lot depth, exceeding the maximum allowed floor area, exceeding the maximum cut and fill depths, no sidewalks on private streets, maximum height, and encroachment of eaves into the setbacks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudes.
So I had a couple of process questions for staff. Commissioner Hanson alluded to this. This is being, we're asked to make a recommendation to council on this, correct? And it's under the current plan development ordinance.
Correct, because it would be a rezoning.
Okay, should this be, should the recommendation be to deny from Planning Commission, is there any point at which the new ordinance might come to play on this particular application?
It would not, because the application has been deemed complete prior. Now, obviously, there may be, depending on the action of council, they may remand it back to Planning Commission, or they may deny it, in which case a new application would have to be filed, so then the new ordinance may have caught up by then.
So that would trigger off of the council's action,
correct?
Not this body's action. The other question I had, because I haven't seen plan developments myself before, is it normal to have two designs come before the Planning Commission It seems there's an alternate design.
So I will just offer that they're proposing options, and we have had plan developments in the past with options. One that pops into my mind is the old McHugh site where the Palo Alto Medical Foundation currently is in Los Gatos Boulevard and Gateway. They had two different site layouts and designs for that proposal when it came through.
Okay. And then with regard to CDAC, since the discussion with CDAC was a very broad set of options, ranging from condominiums to 5 single-family homes, is there any circumstance where this would go back to CDAC?
The advice from CDAC is generally something that's done at the beginning of the process to give some direction and sense of concerns for a project before it's begun. Once it gets to this point, unless they were proposing a totally different project, no, it would not return.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Vice Chair Kane, did you still have a question?
Thank you for an excellent report. Thank you for an excellent report and the written staff report. Comprehensive can make our job easier. What doesn't make my job easier are the excessive detail, bioengineering, all of the things that go into a mitigated negative declaration. And we can do this off record, but maybe somebody else is interested. I have 3 of them, and they're all terribly detailed. And what they're essentially designed to do in about 15 different categories is say, is something potentially bad about this project. And it comes in different response categories. Yes, it's very bad. No, it's not that bad. Well, it's kind of bad, but we can fix it with mitigation. And all of the standard categories are treated that way. A simple education in 2 points. One, why do we have 3 of them? And I know they're sequential, and I suspect they're in response to each other, but I couldn't find clear responses or clear revisions that something said in the first one had to be fixed by the second one, had to be fixed by the third one. It can obfuscate the issue, and a lot of them are very, very objective on soils and noise and emissions. But there was a subjective one, and I don't know that I'm going to put my finger right on it. Maybe I can. This is page 46 of the report dated May 31st, revised final July. They're both 2016, and that...
Vice Chair Kane, is there an exhibit number so we can be sure we're looking at the same one? Because I have exhibit 13.
13, yeah.
Well, it's 13 and 30.
Okay.
And sorry about that. 13, 30, and don't know. I guess this was one of the originals we received. May 31st. They're good. They're comprehensive. They're scientific. They're engineering, and all of this clearly has to be done. When we get to the subjective portion on zoning and does the project comply with ordinances and standards and guidelines, this particular one, the one I mentioned, May 31st, 2016, revised July 2016, says the proposed project would not conflict with any existing land use plan or policy. Therefore, no impacts have been identified. And yet, in your excellent staff report, Ms. Armour, you pointed out a number of issues that argumentatively may not be consistent with our policies and may have impact. How do I reconcile? I'm not a professional. How do I reconcile those two things? And I guess really, what should I be doing with these 3 reports?
So I'm going to start with a few clarifications. I believe you should have 2 reports. So I'm not sure where number 3 is. Maybe you borrowed one from your neighbors. But there was a draft initial study mitigated negative declaration that was prepared. And then the consultant this time decided to prepare a revision to that. So that's what you're looking at right now. There were only minor changes, but they were done in track changes, so you can see where those were throughout the document. And that was just some minor changes in response to comments. So there should be 2 documents that you have in your materials for the project tonight. And then your question about the environmental document and its comments on land use, I'm going to let Joel add to this if he has anything. But I'll just start by saying that the environmental document and CEQA has a very specific set of parameters for what it looks at. And so the proposal for residential in this location does comply with the general plan. It is generally the type of use that is appropriate by our land use regulations. And so this view that CEQA takes is a much higher level view. And so in terms of those predefined categories by the state, the environmental consultant found that this project did not have any significant impacts. The potential impacts could be mitigated. That is the conclusion that they and their consulting experts came to. However, you now have the opportunity to look more detailed rather than the 30,000 feet level review, to look at the specifics of what is being proposed for this PD zone and how it works with our more detailed requirements.
It may not follow, excuse me, it may not follow CEQA requirements or town standards, or I was thinking of when they provide the initial study, if there's a final study to come back, an executive summary, and don't tell me it's in here because I'll be embarrassed, but if there could be an executive summary of what in fact was changed on the part of a further review or the applicant would be extremely helpful. I now confess, because I'd better do it, so overwhelmed was I that the third initial study is from a different project. Nobody's perfect, but thank you for your explanation. The broader view, they did not see potentially significant issues when they clarified meeting general plans and policies such that there are no impacts. It's a broad statement. And then I should look to staff report for more specific guidance.
Correct, and I would add that in your review of the project and the changes that were made to the environmental document, I would recommend looking at the response to comments, which is attached or Exhibit 12, that does have copies of the comments that were received on the environmental document and has a specific response to each of those comments, as well as a reference to what changes, if any, and where they were made within the environmental document.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff?
Well, I may have, and I thought somebody else would.
No, go ahead.
The CDAC minutes that were provided, for which I thank you, is there anything broader than that, or is that the representation of the 2013 meeting of this CDAC?
That is what is available and what was approved and adopted by the CDAC at their following meeting.
As I read them, a number of recommendations, about 14 or 15, were made. Is it a fair question to ask whether or not we know, or you know, in providing the staff report, was attention given to those 14 suggestions? Or is that not the job of the CDAC, but to provide general guidance?
My understanding of the job of the CDAC is to give general comments and response, general impressions to preliminary proposal, to provide some sense for the applicant of what type of project might be appropriate on their site. And then the applicant then has the responsibility to take those comments and move forward in the way that they feel is appropriate.
So whether or not any attention was given to any of those recommendations would essentially not be germane because they were general guidance.
It is general guidance, and it is up to the applicant to choose how to proceed based on the opinions that were shared at that hearing, and it is up to them to respond to any questions that you have in follow up to that.
One final question, if I may.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Inside the report, when they met in 2013, there was a Plan A and a Plan B. A was houses, B was condos, loosely construed. I believe the applicant in one of the documents made the statement that the condos were laid by the wayside because CDAC did not express favor for them, which I didn't necessarily find in the document itself, but also because there was strenuous opposition from the neighbors. Do we have anything at this point that would document that opposition, letters or memories from 2013?
I do not, since I was not staff here for the town at that time.
And you'll hear from a number of members of the public in the neighborhood, and so you'll probably receive a response to that as well.
I thought the statement was important. I wondered if we could substantiate it. That's all. Thank you.
All right, before we open the public portion of the hearing, we are going to take a 10-minute recess. We are back from break and ready to open the public portion of the hearing. So the applicant is at the podium. If you could please state your name and address for the record, and if you have not filled out a speaker card, I will need one, and you have 10 minutes to address the commission.
I told him, he didn't believe me. My name is Kurt Anderson, associate architect with Camargo & Associates. My office address is 120 West Campbell Avenue in Campbell. And Madam Chair, members of the commission, we are really, really glad to be here. As you can tell through Jennifer's report, it's been a long time to get to this point. And we want to take this moment to thank the staff. Jennifer, that was a fantastic report. You did a really great job summarizing your report. Thank you very much for that. And I want to thank all the neighbors that we've had a gazillion meetings with. There are many of them here in the audience, so we appreciate their time being here supporting the project. We hope. So without further ado, let's run through a quick presentation. Jennifer took a little thunder out of my sails because she did such a great job, but let's go through this quickly just to bring you back up to speed, okay? So, which way, Jennifer, which way do I go? To the right? Hey. Okay, so here is a rendering of the proposed project. As you can tell, on the lower left, that is the intersection of Newell and Winchester. So this is what we are proposing at tonight. This is where we started. This is what we presented to CDAC. We had 5 single family homes on the left, and then we had the condominium on the right. And based on CDAC's comments, and very few as Commissioner Kane pointed out, we immediately met with the neighborhood. And I will tell you that the neighborhood was adamantly opposed to 5 homes and the condominiums. And they can address that when they come up and do their presentation. So we came back, and then we looked at doing a couple different configurations on a 4-lot subdivision. And we had always planned on doing a PD approach because the configuration of this parcel, the slope, the size, the location, it really warrants using the PD approach to this project. That's what's allowed under the general plan by the town. On the left, you can see that was a flag lot subdivision. This wasn't going to work because we couldn't get a fire truck turnaround. So we didn't do that one. The one on the right is a full city street with a cul-de-sac, and you can see it leaves minimal area for development for the homes. That is an area view looking down at the corner, so this would actually be looking for a south, gotta get my backwards here, southwest corner, and that's an aerial view of the corner, and you can see the access. Here, let me pull out my special little pen here. This right here, and you notice when you were out at the site that this is a very dangerous situation. And I can tell you for a fact that I used to live in Lamatani Court. I owned a home over there for years and years and years, so I'm very familiar with this site. So this corner right here, as you'll see as we get further through this process, let me do what Tony did, and you'll see as we get further through this process that we have relocated this entry further up Newell, and which we think, in our opinion, really increases the safety factor at that corner, because that is, especially when they had events with all the people coming out of there, that was a major issue, especially with the increased traffic from Netflix and the other commercial development down the street on Winchester. So here's our proposal. This is lot 1, 2, 3, lot 4. Maurice, did I get that right? All the way around? 1, 2. What's that? That's 1, 3, 4. See, that's why they let me do the pretty picture part. So in this proposal, what we've done is we have elevated this area here, and it has a lot to do with the relationship of getting the street from this point here up to the parcel so we can access into the garages on these sites. And one of the reasons that we've got the site configured this way is because this is an extremely busy commercial street. And we did not want to have those houses of private space, the rear yards right here, being at street level from a noise standpoint and also from a safety standpoint. People coming through this intersection, losing control, coming down the street. By getting these houses up, we're protecting the inhabitants of those residences. So this is the current condition. There's that retaining wall along Winchester. This will look at it from Lark Avenue. That's the existing structure. You can see the orange netting here depicting the forms of the homes. This rail right here is backing right up on the parking lot that is on that building. There's another shot of that street. And that is what it looks like with the homes that we have proposed. You can see how the backyards have been elevated used through grading and retaining walls. This is additional fencing here. So we can create layers of landscape along the side to soften the structures to make it a very, very attractive development to that corner. As you know, that corner right now is just basically a sea of asphalt. This is looking at from, again, this would be the southwest. There's that intersection we were talking about. And you can see this whole parcel, this 1.3 acres, is primarily roof and asphalt. It's basically impervious coverage. Now, you know, with dealing with the new C3 regulations that we have in the state of California, impervious coverage is to be minimized because you have to be concerned about the runoff that goes into our bay and into our groundwater and gets contaminated. So one of the things that we're doing with this project is, there's another picture of it, is we are getting rid of all of that asphalt and we're turning it into landscape. We have a smaller street that we're proposing here. You can see as you go up Newell and up the hill that this access point right here is about probably 7 to 8 feet above this corner right here. And then it slopes up to the site. And there it is with some proposed landscaping. There's another shot looking directly up the drive from Newell to the 4 parcels. And you can see how it terraced up the hill. And then it conforms with the rest of the slope of that existing street. If you really think back, that area, if you really look at that whole slope, that whole hill, that went down to Lark Avenue. Winchester was cut into that hill. That's why the town constructed those retaining walls along Winchester, that over on that side back here. So we're getting back more in conformance with the original contours. So here's the plan. Winchester, Newell. Here's our access drive. We've got garages here, 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 and here. Here's our fire truck turnaround. So we meet with the requirements of the fire up at Central Fire. We've got some on-street parking here. And as mentioned in Jennifer's report, we do have a sidewalk here, and we do have a sidewalk here. Now, a lot of these things that we feel that were expressed in the report, these technical nuances, I want to call them, we know those need to be resolved. We're here in front of the Planning Commission because we want you to recommend approval to the council to convert this to a PD residential zoning. So we've got affirmation that we're going in the right direction and that we'll continue to expend the time and the energy to work with staff to get all the technical nuances and exceptions minimized as we go through the process through site and architectural review. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of money to get to this point, 3 years, and we still don't know whether or not the commission and the council want to see residential development. Jennifer said it great in her report. We're in conformance with the general plan. We're in conformance with the zoning. This really is a residential site. Right now, it's a non-conforming commercial use. We want to get this back to what it's supposed to be according to the plan, general plan and the zoning. So this is a conventional subdivision. You can see we've got 60-foot diameter bulbs with 40 feet, street parking, lot sizes less than 10, blah, blah, on and on and on. And this under the planned development, we're going to build and construct that road, and we're going to maintain it. So there's no cost to the town from Newell up. That will be part of the development. They have to maintain the infrastructure, the storm, water, sewer, all those things. So that cost will go to those homes and not to the town, thereby not further burdening the tax base. So part of this right here is when our clients purchased this property, one of the things they looked at was the whole neighborhood, and they looked at La Botania Court. I used to live right here. It's the house I used to own. And this here, it's only one parcel away. So when we looked at this, we felt that was in the immediate neighborhood, that this was comparable to that design La Botania. And we have statistics that we can share with you. I'll let Maurice do that in regards to the house sizes for that. But you'll see this on the next site. There's La Botania. And there are the home sizes. And you can see as red as they come up. You can see they go from 3960, 4,000, 4248. There's a whole variety of sizes there. These other parcels back here are homes that have been renovated and expanded. Now, currently, the rest of the subdivision are not this large because they're still the single-family ranch-style homes, 2,500 square feet. That, Madam Chair, may I keep going?
Yes, you have 30 seconds remaining.
Why don't I just go ahead and cease, and I'll do my closing comments at the end. okay? Because I can't do much with 18 seconds left.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Do commissioners have questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much. I will now invite comments from members of the public. Our first speaker will be Liat Perlman.
Good evening. I live at 183 Newell Avenue, which buttresses against, I think it's Lot 3. Is that correct? Lot 3. That one. And I'm very much in support of this development. I think it's a very reasonable plan, not overusing the piece of property. The property that at 183 is also got quite a significant cut and fill, probably more of a cut than a fill, but that goes back to 1960s when it was originally, when the house was originally built. So I've noted the delta of use on this property, and given that its size, it seems appropriate. In addition, I think it has a really good fill for the space. In terms of keeping with the property, the community, it doesn't exceed the La Montaña type of development, which is nearby. And although I think what is considered the most relevant houses are small in nature by comparison to some of these houses, you know, if somebody was to apply for a remodel and add some square footage, we'd be about the same. So given where we're at in the neighborhood today, I welcome this. My family has lived here for 40 years, and I'm representing the household, and we all welcome this development and can't wait for the work to begin, and I'm hoping there won't be too many holdups in terms of that. This is a space that needs to be filled in and basically utilized in keeping with the nature of the development of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perlman. And don't go away. We have a question for you from Commissioner Birch.
Have you, in reviewing this, which I understand that you support, and I appreciate you coming and speaking tonight, would you be in favor if it were a Class A office space?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. For anyone speaking tonight, when you step up to the podium, please remember to state your name and address for the record. Our next speaker is Khalil Fatani.
Good evening. I'm Khalil Fatahi, as you mentioned, and my home is, I live just adjacent to this project. For 21 years, I've this one. So I have part of my back fence inside, and all of my side yard, the neighbor lot number 2, and the builders have been in touch with us. They have satisfied everything that we want, and me and my wife, we are both very much supportive of the plan as it is presented. And the height of this building, even though this is going to be a 2-story, that especially lot 3 next to mine, but it still is a little even below my roof line, because of the way the land slope is. And we are for 21 years we have been living next to Elk's parking lot. At nights we have been bothered by motorcyclists who like this corner, this cozy corner, and throw their pizza boxes over our fence and receive eggs and beer bottles. And by the time we call the police, it's too late. And so we really welcome just 4 homes for this size lot is not big to us. My lot size is 11,400, I believe. And I went to planning department a few months ago and just wanted to find out how much more I can have. I have 2,500 square feet right now, and I was told between 800 to 850 square feet I can add. So for this lot, especially next to mine, number 3, which is going to be 16,000 square feet, And so if they're going to that size, around 4,000, it should be perfectly fine. And this is a plant, what you will see, this is an exceptional, because the whole neighborhood is behind this. And we don't want anything commercial there. We don't want tennis courts, from courtside extender, and we don't want another parking lot, this turn into parking lot. We're very much in support of this, and as far as I heard some comments, from planning department, they want for this, they're making a comment that they need sidewalks. The whole Newell Avenue on all three courts don't have 1 inch of sidewalk. But I heard that from the builders that they are going even to put a sidewalk there. So we're just very much in support of this, and I hope, without much trouble, this plan goes through. We are fed up with Elks building, ugly building there at its nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fatani. Our next speaker is Harvey Yap.
Good evening. My name is Harvey Yap. My address is 119 Newell Court. I've been in this address for 40 years. My property is one of 6 that adjoin the proposed development, and I support their application to build these 4 homes. I've read the Planning Commission staff report and the recommendation for denial. I feel that there are 6 exemptions that I feel that they are reasonable and should be granted because the site is unique. It's not easy to develop. It's only a 1.4 acre and it's on a hill. And you're looking at putting 4 homes in that location. Although these 4 homes will be larger than most of the houses in the neighborhood, being 2 stories, I would not object to it. I feel that they would be compatible. I request that this PD be approved and allowed to be moved forward. The Elks Club has been vacant for many years, and I consider that this would be a good replacement for this property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Yap. Dale Miller.
So my name's Dale Miller. I'm 115 Newell Court. If you look at that number 4 on the drawing up there, I'm behind Lot 1 in this development. So I, too, am for this development. This property is zoned R1, and this project has been intended, and I think as the neighbors have all talked, we're all supportive of houses. We're tired of the Elks. We're tired of an empty parking lot. We're tired of Courtside coming over and using it for their exercise classes, as was pointed out earlier. This is the first time in any development or any suggested development that the actual architects and developers came and talked to the neighbors. Everything else has been forced down our throat. And as Mr. Paulson knows, I'm the neighborhood grump. I organize everybody, and we come out and complain about what's going next. The neighborhood definitely wants to make sure this is residential. We don't want commercial. We don't want, we don't want Courtside. We don't want anybody else. We want houses. It's a neighborhood. The original developer was Duke. My ex-neighbor, Jack Aiello, who died, Duke willed these 4 lots to the Elks Club originally in the 60s when they had a downturn. So there was a comment about landscaping. There is no landscaping on this. The Elks have never taken care of the landscaping. Everything's dead. Everything's old. It's run down. There's actually a tree that fell over by the Courtside parking lot into the street one night about 3 months ago. So there is no landscaping worth saving. Maybe there's a couple of trees, but not many. The only thing that was ever taken care of on this is when we called the fire department about fire hazards in the spring when the weeds grew. That's the only time the Elks did anything to improve this lot. So I've read through the Planning Commission report. I'd like to see you guys get together, compromise, and make this happen as a development, a planned development. There are things that can be agreed upon, changed, modified. This is the first time we have a builder that's talked to us, worked with us, had several meetings with us, taken our concerns and fixed them. So we appreciate that. But the one additional request I have is because parking in the area, as Khalil talked about, there are no sidewalks in this neighborhood. So I complained to the city before. The previous city traffic planner said the streets conform to the California standards. So they're 34 feet. I measured them the other night. That allows for 2 11-foot lanes for cars and 2 7-foot lanes for parking, but there are no sidewalks. I'd like to see this development have no parking on the south edge of Newell Avenue, which is where this development is, so that people can actually walk and not get run over when they walk down the street. Other than that, close saying that we are definitely for this development. The developers have talked to us, they've worked with us, we had several meetings with us, and we are definitely in favor of this.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Richard Potter.
Good evening. I'm Rick Potter. I live at 144 Newell Avenue, which is a little further up the street, but as my neighbors who back up to this property have so aptly pointed out, it's a project that's due. And the property's been sitting there vacant for a long, long time, and the plan that has been proposed for all of us who live in the neighborhood, I've been there for 25 years, we all seem to think it's going to be a great project, and we encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Our last speaker is Tobin Lehman.
Hi, I'm Toby Lehman. I live at 175 Newell Avenue, which is right on that corner. It's nice being last because I get to just say, yeah. Everyone's made all the good points, and I just want to agree with them and say, yes, please approve this planned development. I've had the benefit of being next to this vacant lot and all the RVs and motorcycles and everything that come up in there. It'd be really nice to have high-quality housing, and I guess that, well, my wife, Shannon, and I really are looking forward to having new neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you. The applicant, Mr. Anderson, and his team is now invited back to the podium for 5 minutes to add further comments.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. They really have been a joy to work with. We've met with them, I think, at least 6 times, and they've given us a lot of great suggestions and things for us to consider, and we've been working very closely. So we're very, very happy to have their support and be next to such great neighbors. So I've got some closing comments. I'm going to put this up. I think this will help. You're burning up my time. I need an extra 20 seconds. So I've summarized this. I took that packet. I have one thing for you, Commissioner Kane. So initial study, just so you understand in our language for what we do. The initial study is what we do, is the first environmental study for the project. If that initial study determines there are no environmental concerns, that's it. There's no more. That's what's used to create the mitigated negative deck. If there's additional concerns that need to be further that exceed the certain standards, then we go to what they call phase 2. So when that initial study is presented to you like it is, that's as far as we're going to go environmentally because we've met the concerns of CEQA. Okay? I don't know if that'll help you or not, but so I drilled through this report, Marie's clients. So this, I prepared this like I was a commissioner. If I was looking at this, why would I want to approve this project? So let me run through this. It's not in your packet. Do you want to see a hard copy? We can give you one real quick.
If it's impossible to read, maybe others can, but
Maurice, can you?
I hate to waste your time this way. Maybe
That's
we
okay.
can stop the clock. If you've got copies of that, it would be very helpful.
We're going to bring them to you right now.
Madam Chair, if that's
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Madam Chair, okay. So I'll run through these real quick. Francesco, please just pass them out. Thank you. Let me give you a couple of seconds to get those. All right, let's start at the top. The reasons to approve this project. 1, we are converting a non-conforming commercial use to a residential use. Just like the neighbor said, no more commercial, we want residential. Secondly, the proposed PD residential zoning is in conformance with the general plan. Jennifer said that in her report. Thirdly, the proposed PD residential zoning is in conformance with the zoning plan. Jennifer said that in her report. The proposed PD zoning is compatible with adjacent residential neighborhoods, including the Newell subdivision and the La Montagne Court subdivision. Next, we are eliminating a safety issue at the corner of Newell and Winchester by relocating the driveway access. We talked about that earlier. Next, we are significantly reduced the amount of impervious coverage on the site, which reduces the pollution into the groundwater in the bay. That's huge. That's all part of our greenhouse emissions issue. Next, we are bringing the site into conformance with the C3 requirements of the state of California for groundwater treatment. By building the project we're going to build, we're going to eliminate all that runoff. It's going to now go into bioswales and treatments, as you saw in the negative deck. We're going to eliminate a big issue there. We are significantly increasing the amount of landscaping on the site. More oxygen, less carbon dioxide. We are reducing the number of trips. This hasn't really been discussed tonight because it now goes to residential use. The amount of trips generated from that site instead of a commercial use are significantly reduced. We are eliminating an unattractive project and building replaced with 4 beautiful residences. Next, we have worked diligently with the neighborhood to design a project that's garnered an overwhelming support from the neighboring residences, as evidently in the previous presentations. The size of the design parcels is a similar nature to La Montagne Court, which is also zone R1 12,000. The project is designed today's housing standards and not standards that would apply to the 50-year-old subdivision that was Newell. The houses will be green rated. They'll be constructed to the new building codes that will be adopted in 2017, which are going to be significant from an energy standpoint, et cetera. We are at our expense fixing a site that's got major problems. And we're going to fix that. And that's one of the reasons we need the size of the homes so we can afford to make those improvements to that site. There's a significant amount of cost with infrastructure, street, et cetera, et cetera. We explored other options, and this is the best result. And with the PD zoning, we're eliminating any cost to the town. So what we're requesting tonight is this. We're asking the commission to recommend to the council the approval of PD residential zoning for the 4-lot residential subdivision. We'd like you to approve the size, recommend the approval of the size of residence to vary from 33,000. May I continue?
Yes, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Vice Chair Kane, let me.
Okay, 30
seconds.
Well, you can read my comments. I don't need to go through them to minute. But this gives, I feel that this is a summation of the report, the issues, and what we're trying to achieve. So if you don't have any further questions, we're available for technical questions from staff. But the big deal is here, we'd like you to recommend to the council that we come back to site and architectural review application, come back to the commission for approval and not to the design review committee. That way you all can have a really chance to be involved in the final results.
Thank you. Thank you. Time is now up. Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell.
You've seen the report of the staff that we received.
Correct.
And that, of course, recommends denial.
Correct.
And at page 5 of that report, they list some, but not all, of the exceptions that you would need to have this project approved. You haven't responded to any of those.
Commissioner O'Donnell, we've been working with the staff for almost 3 years, and we've just gotten to the point where we need to have assurance and a recognition from the commission and the council that we can do a residential subdivision here. We're willing to spend a bunch of money with design, engineering, working with staff to get this approved. But we're looking for the PD zoning approval. We're not looking for site and architecture tonight. That's not what this application is. So we'd like those things, those considerations to come back.
This is fairly simple. It says, what's wrong with your application? You have not responded to one of the things they've said. I think homes sound great there. On the other hand, when they say these are the problems and you don't respond, you kind of tie our hands. So could you tell me why you don't respond?
Let me put it to you like, let me see if I can make this clear. And I appreciate your position. I've been doing this for 40 years. I know your side of the dais. I've been there. It's a significant cost for the site. Our clients have spent a significant amount of money with all the consultants. We were told from day one by staff they weren't going to support our application. And so we've gone through 5 planners. We've gone through a whole bunch of technical review, and things keep changing. Okay, and we still have not yet had a positive indication of support from the town that we were going to be able to do this project. So what we're hoping to get from the commission tonight is, hey, guys, we'd love to see residential use here. You've got some issues on there that you need to resolve. We'll support you if you get these issues resolved. Or send it to the council, recommend approval, that we come back and work with staff. That's on my recommendations. That we'll work with them. And we're committed to have a beautiful project. We want to spend 3 years, met with the neighbors, done all this reiterations. Sure.
As I said, as far as I'm concerned, you've tied our hands. You have not responded to these objections. But were we to recommend denial, then you'd get to the council. Would that, is that what you'd like?
No, we'd actually like to have your support.
Okay,
now,
to get our support, we are required that you comply with the various laws we have. You don't comply with them. We just can't say we like homes and let's go for it. And you've got a list here that you haven't bothered to do anything for. Okay. I don't understand that.
Let me use an analogy, okay? And I've used this in other cities that we work in. So think of planning guidelines, setbacks, FARs, all this stuff that we do as we're creating a dome. Okay, we're creating a dome. We have to design a project that fits in with that dome. But the dome here is loose. We don't really know what it is. We don't know if we have a dome. So if maybe you say, hey guys, you know what? We love your project. We'll support it, but go back to staff and get these things worked out and then come back to the commission. That would be the first indication from the town that we're ready to go full tilt and get this resolved, because we now get the support of a residential project. We've got the support of the neighborhood. We have yet to have indication from the town that y'all will support it. Tell us you'll support it, and we'll get those things worked out. We'll come back here, happy campers, and get this resolved.
Thank you for that answer. Did that help you? All right. Commissioner Birch.
Well, to follow up with what Commissioner O'Donnell's saying and then to take what you're saying. So I don't believe it's moving parts. Very clearly in our residential guidelines, there's a limit to the FAR, there's a limit to square footage, there's a limit to height, there's a limit in cut and fill in the hillsides. Those don't change. Those have been, and those are what this body has been appointed to adhere to. So if you're saying, we'll say, yes, it's homes and we'll fix them, then are you saying if I go, all right, and I do think homes are what need to go there, and actually your neighbors are the ones that just convinced me of that.
Okay.
But does that mean you're now going to fall in line with the FAR, fall in line with the setbacks, fall in line with the height requirements, fall in line with the sidewalk requirements, and fall in line with the cut and fill? Or are you still going to say, great, you let me do homes, but I'm still going to ask for all these exceptions?
I can't answer that question specifically to that. I can say this, that our clients are committed to work with the town to make a project work in that site if we have a positive indication that the commission will support a residential project there. Does that, am I not answering the question well?
Actually, I'm going to wait. I'm going to ask staff more later when it's that time.
We cannot give any guarantees. I can say that. Any other commissioners have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Hanson.
I have a couple questions. Have you read our guidelines? Like, for example, like to approve a plan development. I mean, it says here that the plan development is supposed to provide for alternative uses and developments that are more consistent with the site characteristics, not to change the site into another site so that you can build whatever you want there. I mean, clearly it's zoned for residential. I think we all agree that, but how do you think this complies with our plan development? I mean, a plan development isn't, a way to get around all of other guidelines.
Well, in my opinion, with all due respect, a PD gives you a vehicle to do things that are differently that are required by your normal standard setbacks because of the unusual either configuration, location, surrounding uses. It gives you some flexibility as a deciding body to make changes over base because of the unusual project. So,
I mean, there must be another proposal out there that could meet our design guidelines. There's certainly plenty of a lot available. It's very clear what our guidelines are. So, I mean, and my other question for you was, were you involved with the CDAC feedback? Because that was in our packet, and they very clearly said yes, residential, but they said development should meet unmet needs, don't have too much cut and fill, you don't need to exceed the guidelines that are spelled out, you need to fit in with the neighborhood. The neighborhood is very clearly defined in our residential design guidelines as 2, 2, and 5, the immediate neighborhood, not Montana Court or, or whatever around that. And these are things that are spelled out in our guidelines. So I just ask why you think that this PD is justified.
I'm gonna say this. I think by your questions and the position you're taking, that one, and this I'll make a supposition on my part. This is strictly me. I'm not speaking for the team, but I think that generally speaking, y'all are in favor of supporting the residential project here. Okay, and this is me. I'm not holding you. I'm not putting you on the line here. So I think what we should really do is I think we as applicants should request a continuance to allow us to address all of the concerns that have been the exceptions, come up with something that makes everybody, the staff happy and the town happy, and come back to you and present it to the commission at that point in time so we can eliminate these exceptions and get something worked out that we're all happy with. Then we can move this thing forward, and I think that's probably that way we can come up and go, guys, we got it. We got neighborhood. We've got all this stuff worked out with staff. We're ready to move forward. So right. I think that probably makes the most sense for everybody involved.
Thank you. I think the question was answered. Commissioner Hudes, followed by Vice Chair Kane.
So just to be specific about that, on page 6 of the staff report, there are 6 bullet points that describe how the project would require exceptions, meaning that it would not be compliant. Are you familiar with that staff report?
Yes, correct. I'm looking at it right now. It's page 13.
Okay. So are you saying that you would be willing to look at all of those 6 exceptions?
That's correct.
Okay. Including the one with 125-foot minimum, the first one? Page 6? Oh, I'm on page 6. Yeah, sorry.
Where are we at?
There's 6 bullet points there. I think they're repeated several times.
We're willing to look at every single one of those items and address them and come to a resolution. Page number 6.
All right. Commissioner Birch?
6 items.
Based on what the applicant is saying, would I be out of place to make a motion to continue?
Yeah,
sorry, jumping ahead of myself.
Yeah, no problem. If there's not any further questions, I will close the public portion of the hearing. No further questions. You may sit down. Thank you very much. All right, so I will look to commissioners, and I'm going to look to Commissioner Birch to make her motion.
I'm going to move to continue application PD 14-002 and mitigated negative declaration ND-16-002 to a date certain, which we will get to, specifically so that the applicant can address the items listed on page 6 of the staff report to eliminate the need to ask for the exceptions. So
right.
I would look to staff, though, for the date.
Do we have a date?
So the earliest it could be would be the November 9th meeting. Not sure that's going to give the applicant enough time to address that. And so probably the better option is the December 7th. And if we're still not done then we'll just continue it from there.
Okay, I can look to the audience with a nod of the head about November 9th. Okay, December 7th sounds like a good idea. All right. Do you want to add that date to your motion?
Yes, I would add that to my motion.
Vice Chair Kane?
I won't be supporting the motion.
There's no second here.
Oh,
There is no second. I'm looking for, all right. Commissioner O'Donnell
Having been seconded.
seconds the motion. So I will look to commissioners now for discussion, and Vice Chair Kane.
I won't be supporting the motion for this reason. What I'd rail against is specificity. And those 6 points, as we progress in the development of this motion, I've got about 14 of them. And what I would say, with all due respect and all sincerity, is you don't want to make people happy. You want to comply with the standards, the guidelines, the things we've been given to uphold. And there's a whole staff report in here about reservations and concerns, and I don't want to limit it to 6 points because that becomes a target. I would say comply with the hillside standards and guidelines. I'd say comply with the residential guidelines. Often I say listen to your neighbors. Your neighbors love you, so that's okay. But the third point is to really pay attention to staff. If we've been working on this since 2013, it's not a mystery. They've clearly told you what we need to have to comply with our standards and guidelines. So I can't support it because I don't like specificity. I don't like being happy. I'd rather just comply.
Commissioner Birch.
I will strike the comment about referring just to page 6, and what I will instead say is that I am asking that you comply with all of staff made a number of recommendations and comments in this, that you just stick to that.
Does the seconder accept that?
Yes. Let me say, so we are clear. The fact that we've said we're going to send this back, if you've indicated willingness to try to work this out, doesn't mean we're pre-approving the project. But I appreciate that offer they made. I think the motion deals with that. So I would keep my second.
Any further discussion? Vice Chair Kane.
If it's inappropriate, I'll stop. But I would encourage you to take heed to what you're hearing and feeling up here so that we don't waste your time. Give it a good second shot and see what we can do with that property. Something will be there. Likely not this is what I'm hearing from my colleagues. So give it a good shot. Work with staff. They're very good.
All right. I will call the question unless there's further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights of the actions of the Commission on this item?
There are not.
Thank you. Item number 5, 140 South Santa Cruz Avenue, DBA, location known as the Toll House. Conditional use permit application U-16-005. Requesting a modification to an existing conditional use permit to allow entertainment before 10 p.m. on property zoned C-2 PD. APNs 510-45-064 and 065. May I have a show of hands from commissioners who have visited the site? Any disclosures from commissioners? Ms. Sarnowitz, I understand you'll be providing us with the staff report this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we have a communication that was not included with the last addendum inadvertently, and that's being passed out this evening to you as I give you the staff report. As background, in June of this year, the Policy Committee recommended and Council adopted a late-night entertainment policy to allow entertainment which complies with the noise ordinance by right before 10 p.m. And the policy only allows late-night entertainment after 10 p.m. with the approval of a separate late-night entertainment permit. The application before you this evening is the first of several anticipated requests to amend existing CUPs to come into conformance with that adopted policy. This site is located downtown on the west side of South Santa Cruz Avenue, adjacent to both commercial and residential uses. The request of the Town Council is to modify the 1994 CUP for the restaurant use, which includes outdoor dining until 10 p.m. on the patio and overlooks the hotel's central outdoor courtyard. The applicant is requesting removal of the condition in the existing CUP which prohibits music, entertainment, or amplified sound on the courtyard, and they are asking for the addition of a condition stating that entertainment before 10 p.m. in conformance with the town policy regulating late-night entertainment is allowed. As described in the applicant's letter, the request is being made in order to provide outdoor entertainment, including music at a low volume and amplified toasts, consistent with the adopted entertainment policy. So this evening, staff is recommending the Commission consider the merits of the proposed modification and forward its recommendations on this application to the Town Council. And this concludes staff report, and we're here to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sarnowitz. Questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
This site has a fairly long history, and I've been around perhaps through all of it. I've heard the neighbors complain repeatedly for non-compliance, and this then would be compliance. But I guess what I'm wondering is they were objecting to, at that time, the applicant, not this applicant, but the predecessor, just ignored the use permit and was having outdoor entertainment, music, etc., and that bothered the neighbors. Is there any reason to believe that because of this change in the law by the council, that that's going to affect the sound so that the neighbors will not continue to be bothered? I'm confused by the change of the law is somehow going to change the nuisance value of the sound.
I think that's yet to be determined, depending on the outcome of this process through the Planning Commission and ultimately the council. If they're allowed to do outdoor entertainment where they're currently not allowed to do that, there will be an impact, but they will be required, as is required by the policy, to meet the noise ordinance. So there could be audible noise that would be heard by the neighbors.
Okay. So you made a recommendation, the staff's made a recommendation. So I assume that you believe that were they to have this entertainment, it either is not going to bother the neighbors, or if they simply comply with the noise ordinance, which I think kicks in at what, 10?
Well, the noise ordinance actually is 24 hours a day. There's different noise levels.
Right, but the significant one, I think, kicks in, doesn't it? Is it?
Correct. It significantly lowers at 10 p.m. And
So
the
you
policy,
have some belief that if they comply with the 10 o'clock ordinance, but at, say, 7 o'clock, they don't have to comply with it. I guess I'm just wondering, what is the basis of the recommendation that we should go ahead and approve this?
The basis is the adopted policy by the town council to allow this by right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
Well, I think one of the key issues here is that this particular property abuts a neighborhood directly, and it's not even a house. One thing that separates them, one of the neighbors. So, do we have other restaurants that have this close of proximity that are eligible for the live entertainment, or have implemented it successfully without annoying the neighbors?
Well, given that the policy was adopted in June, we don't have a whole lot of history there. We also have this evening Monica Wren, who may have some additional input. She's the Economic Vitality Manager, so she may have some additional input. But obviously we have commercial businesses adjacent to residential throughout town. Any commercial business currently can have entertainment up until 10 p.m. and does not require any permits. So any of the other adjacent tenants to this space could have entertainment, as long as they comply with the noise ordinance based on the town's policy.
Mr. Paulson, can you just clarify the entertainment policy, that there is no restriction on the number of entertainers, so you could have a solo harpist, a 50-member orchestra, or a 10-member rap group?
Technically, yes. Some of those may be challenged by the noise ordinance limits, but technically that could be possible.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell, followed by Commissioner Hanson.
Just another question, because I'm just thinking out loud with you. The only music that I can think of that might be loud in that area is number 1 Broadway, and that's, I think, all indoors. However, it's generously applied. So do you get complaints from the neighbors about the music from number 1 Broadway?
We did not request that information from the police department, but we can definitely obtain that information.
I'm just curious, because that's indoors, and if there were complaints, that would be helpful to know, but if you don't know, that's okay.
We don't know. I imagine there are a number of neighbors here to speak, and so they'll definitely add into it, and then Mrs. Arnowitz may have some additional information.
Commissioner Hanson? I'm sorry, Ms. Arnowitz, go ahead and answer that, and then we'll have Commissioner Hanson answer her question.
Yeah, and Monica Wren may speak to it also, but in the last 2 years of police records, the police look at a general area, and there have been, there's only one case where there was a complaint in the general area, and when that was investigated, there was no identification of the source. And so, of course, number 1 Broadway is right next door and is in the general area anyway.
Commissioner Hanson?
So just taking the example that you guys gave, not even 2 minutes ago. So like, for example, Willow Street Pizza, which is a little bit down the street and not directly in front of a residence. But if they decided on their outdoor patio to bring in a live band, they can do that up until 10 o'clock.
unfortunately, I don't have their CUP in front of me. So just to back up a little bit, there's generally 3 categories which businesses will fall into. There's businesses that don't require a CUP, so they can do outdoor entertainment up until 10 p.m. On the CUP front, generally there are conditional use permits that are silent, which they don't say it's allowed or not allowed, and so they would comply with the policy. There are a couple that do allow for entertainment, and some of those also require them to comply with any adopted policy. And then there are ones, such as this is the case, where it is not permitted. And so those ones where it's not permitted, they have to come back through this process to look to the Planning Commission and ultimately the council in this case as to whether or not their request is appropriate.
Well, the reason I asked is because the applicant themselves said that they're at a competitive disadvantage, so I was just trying to validate that.
Vice Chair Kane.
Somebody wrote that this went up in 62 or in the 60s at some point. They began building the hotel. It was later expanded. And I wrote down somewhere that was 47 years ago, or whatever the right number was. Things change over 47 years. And certainly what's changed in June of this year is a new policy which we've been asking for some time regarding entertainment, because various restaurants want to, well, I'm going to ask you the question without answering it. To the Director of Economic Vitality, what is the purpose of the new ordinance? What's changed?
How about now? Okay. So I believe the intent in working with the policy committee and then with the council on this is that you're correct. One is we've been waiting for a long time to have an entertainment policy. Several people's conditional use permits do say that they must comply with the one that's in process. It was in process for quite some time. Second, it became obvious that when it was intertwined with the alcohol policy, it had just so many issues and became so complicated that the policy committee recommended separating the two, kind of taking the entertainment as a low-hanging fruit, bringing it to the council and seeing if we could get a policy established for the entertainment to allow for that. And given that it's in compliance with the noise ordinance and the town code already, hypothetically somebody could have that ambient noise or have patrons at their business making the same level of noise and being in compliance.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Again, I'm trying to remember some of these events we've had. For a period of time, Old Town was trying to get some permission to entertain outdoors, and as you recall, they have a recessed area in the back. And I can't remember what we did about that. But I do remember that the neighbors there were concerned. I'm wondering if, and I've never seen them have outdoor entertainment, very frankly, and I live on the other side of the freeway. I'd probably hear it. So what do we do with that one?
Let me see if, as you're going through deliberations, I can pull the CUP up on my phone, or otherwise I will track that down.
Yeah, that'd be fine. If you can't find it tonight, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
All right, so I do have a question for staff, and that has to do with Exhibit 4. When I look at the conditional use permit that restricts the music in the courtyard, and it says the permit is issued to the Toll House Hotel Restaurant. So we're looking at a courtyard, and there may be different entities within this plan development. You've got the Verge Restaurant, you've got the Toll House Hotel. I'm not sure if they have a restaurant within the hotel that's separate from the Verge Restaurant. So who does the courtyard belong to?
And I think the applicant can speak to that as well. Technically, the courtyard belongs to the hotel, but the CUP references the courtyard. So even though the CUP pertains to the restaurant, it does reference the courtyard. So that's part of what I believe the request is, to clarify that this evening.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, I will open the public testimony portion of the public hearing and invite the applicant and their team to address the commission for up to 10 minutes. And if you've not filled out a speaker card, if you could please do so. I'm not sure I identified one in here. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, here it is.
Good evening. My name is Jim Gurney. I'm the Regional Vice President, General Manager of the I work for an investment group called MetWest Terra. We purchased the hotel in early 2012. Shortly thereafter, when we purchased the hotel, we realized that the entertainment that we were doing on the courtyard was being challenged. Excuse me. And we went back and looked at it, and really, quite honestly, in the due diligence of the purchase, we were not brought up to speed on the conditional use permit. Once we became aware of the conditional use permit, we immediately cease and desist. I have been at that hotel for 4 years, and I am aware of one incident that happened at a wedding that was on the courtyard where Elvis showed up and we had to kick him out, but it was unannounced and unapproved by us. I believe that understanding the relationship between our neighbors and our business has been pretty paramount for us. We run businesses and we actually want our neighbors, and great opportunities. Thanksgiving, we have a lot of our neighbors bring their families and stay in our hotels, and they come to our restaurant for Easter, Mother's Day, and Thanksgiving brunches, where we do 300 to 500 people a stint, and a lot of those are local. So our relationship with the neighborhood has been pretty important to us. And you know what? I feel very confident. And you mentioned, Mr. O'Donnell, that we have a history. Yeah, not mine. I'm kind of proud of the fact that our history stopped with conflict with our neighborhood immediately upon our becoming aware of the conditional use permit. We have never touched it. We have never challenged it. We have about 30 weddings a year outside. We do not allow those weddings to do any type of amplified activity, and that really hurts our business. We really kind of crossed the road on June 21st. June 21st, Palacios doing music right in the backyard of homes right there on the street next to them. And you know what? We look at that and we're like, why can't we be like them? You know what? We have a similar restaurant. We have an outdoor space. They're not being offensive. It was a nice, a Spanish type of, it was nice music. I went out myself. I enjoyed it. I think that you're absolutely right. The risk of understanding what this new ordinance does has to be looked at pretty closely, but there's a noise ordinance that supersedes it. We have never once, in my 4 years been there, been challenged once on a noise ordinance. We have never once received conflict with anybody since I've been there on any of the issues involved with the conditional use permit. I understand the history goes before my time and before my staff's time, but I think we've done a pretty good job. And one of the things is, this thing started, we've begun community outreach. We've got an open house on October 6th to kind of talk about the $2 to $3 million we've already spent, as well as the $2 million we're going to continue spending on our meeting space to really enhance our product that the community may or may not want to use. I think that the message that we've been trying to send is that, you know what, and there's people here, they're going to say, hey, 2011 was terrible. I get it. But I wasn't here in 2011. I don't think that holding me accountable for something in 2011 that was a violation of an ordinance that is no longer a violation of an ordinance needs to be looked at a little differently. You know what? My petition really here is tonight to the Planning Commission is that you do stick with your approval recommendation, and then we move forward. I mean, we've got to continue our community outreach. We've got to continue talking about what we do. The recommendation was yesterday that we do decibel tests, and we really look at some alternative ways to make sure we're communicating effectively what we're doing. And I'm willing to look at anything. But to be at a competitive disadvantage based upon an ordinance that exists today is really my obligation to challenge. I mean, I think I should be given a fair shake. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Gurney, for your presentation. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Hudes.
Thank you. I wanted to understand a little bit more, since there's been some public comment about the impact to the neighborhood. You stated that you do 30 weddings per year. In the letter dated June 30th, it says your number of weddings has dwindled to 5 to 7 per year. Which is it?
Well, I'm talking about actually the indoor wedding ceremonies and receptions. We're dwindling on our outdoor weddings because we can't have amplified ceremonies.
So your letter's not correct. So it says weddings on site and
ceremonies themselves.
So what you're saying is that you do 30 weddings indoors and you do 5 to 7 outdoors?
Correct.
That's your testimony? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I want to understand, too, what you need. As I understand it, you don't have a problem with sound when you're indoors, and apparently you do have some events, like some weddings, that are indoors, so that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the outdoors, and it would be advantageous and you think fair were you able to do, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. The amplified sound where people are talking and they're introducing people and they're telling jokes, which you do at weddings, I understand that. But then sometimes at weddings, of course, you have a band. Is it your proposal? And I'm not trying to parse this yet but I just kind of understand what goes on. So conceptually, we might have a situation where there's a band outside. Is that right?
Conceptually, certainly.
Okay. All right. So that the scope of this then would be more than amplified sound of a speaker. It could be singers. It could be a band.
Which would still be held under the noise ordinance.
Yeah, no, I understand. Now I understand better what you're proposing.
I mean, the other thing, I don't know why in the past it wasn't really addressed, but we have 150 guest rooms that surround that specific area that we have to be sensitive to those paying customers as well. And I understand that in the past that probably didn't happen, but the amount of money we've invested in that property to make it a premium property suggests that we look at it differently. And I think the behavior of my team and the hotel since we've owned it in 2012 suggests a completely different posture than what may have happened before.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much. I will now invite comments from members of the public. Our first speaker is Michael Verga.
Good evening. My name is Mike Verga. I live at 46 Broadway Avenue. Recently, you may have heard that CB Hannigan's will most likely be closing. One of the owners, Mr. Benson, had this to say, and I quote from a local paper. Benson said he and Hannigan might be able to manage the rent increase by adding late-night entertainment, a move he said would probably upset nearby neighbors. Being sensitive to the fact that we're right up against the Almond Grove neighborhood would create all sorts of havoc and not something we ever intended to do or will do, he said. The Toll House, on the other hand, does not show the same compassion, quite the opposite. In fact, the letter that Jason Bogan wrote in his request to allow outdoor entertainment, and the key here is outdoor entertainment. The neighbors are not opposed to the indoor entertainment. The letter he wrote very tellingly does not mention the neighbors at all. I believe we matter. The truth is the Toll House could parade 100 people in favor of their proposal. However, the reality is a handful of neighbors would bear the brunt of this noise. How is that fair? I lived through the noise of the summer of 2011. There was nothing fair about it. That summer, the Toll House was applying for a change to their CUP. The town allowed them to go ahead and have entertainment during the petition process. The Toll House had entertainment and claimed the volume was in compliance. It was not. The amplified sound could be heard all over our neighborhood. All summer we were subject to this noise. There were sound meters, complaints filed, police called. The charade went on all summer. I specifically remember one summer evening seeing the late, great Peter Carter and his wife Denise sitting on their front steps of 45 Broadway. I went over and asked them what they were up to. They said the backyard was just too noisy, but they just wanted to be outside. Having an outdoor venue bordering a neighborhood is inappropriate. Where my house is located at 46 Broadway, the sound is bad, but just a few doors down at 30 and 42 Broadway, the amplified sound was ridiculous. The way the courtyard is situated, it pumps out the sound right to lower Broadway. I cannot see how anyone, any business, anybody could impose that noise on someone else. We met with the town, registered complaints, talked to town council, wrote letters. In the end, we had over 70 of our neighbors sign a letter protesting the noise. Finally, the Toll House quit. When I heard from a neighbor that the Toll House was again requesting outdoor entertainment, I just about wanted to sell my house. It clearly did and would negatively affect my quality of life if this CUP is to be changed. I strongly urge you to not change the CUP. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Don't go away. So when the council revised their entertainment policy, did you provide input to council?
I personally was not aware of that.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Lori Baker.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lori Baker, and I live at 45 Broadway. And I've been a resident of downtown for 13 years now, and I'm very committed to the merchants here and to their success and economic vitality. I'm actually getting married next month in Los Gatos, and every vendor that we chose is a Los Gatos vendor or merchant, and all of our guests from out of town are staying at the Toll House. We want to be a very good neighbor to the Toll House because our backyard is their property line. I have two concerns with this request. One is the lack of communication. I think Commissioner Kane mentioned the comment, listen to your neighbors. No one from the Toll House has approached us about this requested change. And in fact, the only reason I know this is happening is because of a neighbor making me aware of it. A lot of the terminology that you all are familiar with because of the roles you are in, I'm not as familiar with as a layman. So when I see a postcard come in around a CUP change, I don't always necessarily know exactly what that means. But once I did come to find out what that meant, I was concerned that I hadn't been notified by my neighbor, the Toll House. I'm in the middle of a major remodel of my own home, and one of the things I did straight away was reach out to all of my neighbors to make sure they understood what we were doing, going to the Historical Society or the Historical Committee, and I was encouraged by the town to do that. So I was surprised to hear tonight the Toll House represent themselves that they've done the same because I've not heard from them. But my second and largest concern is how this noise will impact my family. I have a 10-year-old son, a 3-year-old son, and a 1-year-old son. We moved to this house 2.5 years ago from Edelin to get a little bit bigger backyard and to have more space for our growing family. And I remember reading in the disclosures at the time that the Toll House was not allowed to have music outdoors. We were aware of the light pollution and the fact we were going to be up against the Toll House, but they've been nothing but a good neighbor to date. And like I said, like to support them and see them be successful. But I have young children that go to bed at 8 o'clock at night that have homework to do. We have a backyard that we want to enjoy, and I'm very concerned about what outdoor weddings will be like for us till 10 o'clock on a regular basis throughout the summer months and beyond. So I'd like the commissioners to really consider how this will not only impact my family, but all of the families on Broadway. And thank you for your time tonight.
Same question for you from me, Ms. Baker. When council revised their entertainment policy, did you consider providing input?
I would have been happy to if I knew that was happening.
Thank you. Next speaker is Roger Pointer.
Madam Chairman, members of the council, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm going to read this. I'm also going to put it up here, I guess. You've asked me to provide 15 copies because I didn't make the 11 o'clock deadline this morning. So these are copies for people to look at. Great, thank you. I'll keep one. My name is Roger Pointer. I am the president of the Los Gatos Meadows Residents Council. At our monthly meeting on September 12th, 2016, the Toll House request to have entertainment in their outdoor courtyard was discussed. Many of our residential units are close to the courtyard. Any sound from the courtyard is irritating to many of our residents and interrupts the quiet enjoyment of living in their apartment. As president, I was given authority to oppose any change in the conditional use permit that would permit any entertainment in the courtyard area. Therefore, the residents of the Los Gatos Meadows hereby join in the letter of September 8, 2016, Exhibit G, which is on the other side of my comments, from our fellow neighbors opposing any change in the conditional use permit and endorse their request. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dixie Fisher.
One quick comment. That is, the Meadows loves jazz in the Plaza, and we support that tremendously. We buy tickets, and we love it.
Thank you. We love it too.
My name is Dixie Fisher. I live at 74 1/2 Broadway, and that's 10 houses up the street. So very conscious that the current, and I'm sorry, I can't remember your title, is saying he's not to blame for 2011. Just want to give you context that when the CUP was violated previously by the Toll House owners, 10 houses up the street, I was slapped in the face with music when I walked outside my door. And it wasn't tasteful music. I also note that he says the music at Palazzo was tasteful. I never need to hear play that funky music, White Boy, again, and certainly not at that volume. I don't know if their CUP could also regulate tasteful wedding music, but I think that frequently it doesn't happen. So I also want to respond. I used to actually be a planning commissioner reporter, and I think, at that time, the newspaper had a little more resources to report more fully about the implications. I'm not saying that the Los Gatos Times Weekly doesn't do it, but I do read the paper every week, and I did see that the entertainment policy was being revised, and I frankly thought it had nothing to do with us, because, entertainment policy typically involves alcohol. I'm now learning that there was this separation or whatever. But we fought to have the Toll House honor their CUP that was so thoughtfully crafted so many years ago in the many, many meetings that apparently were held between the neighbors and the prospective Toll House owners. And there's absolutely no way that I would have imagined, even having sat in years of planning commission meetings, that it would just be disregarded some 5 years later. I didn't know that we would have to do this again, and I wasn't notified until a neighbor told me. So I would just please ask that the CUP not be revised, that it was thoughtfully created and for a very good and specific reason.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Don't go away. We've got a question from Vice Chair Kane.
I appreciate your comprehensive view of the situation and the fact that you've had a tough history with this situation. What's changed is we now have a new entertainment policy.
Right.
Can you envision any way that you could live with such a policy being shared with the Toll House under certain terms and conditions?
Well, so this gets personal. I also practice the Sabbath, and I ask that we please not have leaf blowers on Sabbath. And so it is hard for me to imagine any situation on a Sunday where blaring music is really okay. And, it's a different time period. Number One Broadway is there, and the music is contained. And if I stand right outside, I can hear and enjoy it. It doesn't hit me when I step outside my door. So it is the outside issue, and it is the amplification. And the amplification on Broadway is very odd. I can hear, there were kids who sat across the street on a raised porch, and they're whispering to each other, and I could hear them as if they were next door. So, you get those kind of...
Aside from your superpowers,
No, but it's just like you can't, like I'm saying, I get hit with that music right 10 houses up, and just the fact that it's outside and uncontained, I honestly can't see how that's going to be okay. Based on what I experienced, I guess if they had unamplified, cello or violin, I think the amplification has a lot to do with it. But I can't see how amplified music would work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner O'Donnell's got a question for you. Please. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Question for staff. Was this matter noticed to neighbors?
Yes, this was noticed as a public hearing.
So within, what, 300 feet?
300 feet, yes.
That's what the law requires, right?
That's correct.
So that notice did go out.
Yes.
I'm not commenting one way or the other. I just wanted to double check that the notice went out. Okay, thank you.
Gail Randolph.
Is this working here? It's okay now? Thank you. Closer. Okay, I'm Gail Randolph. I live at 42 Broadway. I've lived in Los Gatos since 1971 and in this present location since 75. When I first moved to Broadway, 140 South Santa Cruz Avenue was a dirt field and it was zoned commercial. And so in anticipation centered around what could be a good fit for that space. In 1983, the hotel was chosen and built, and we were happy to have made that match. A decade later, the town created an alcohol policy, and the Toll House CUP was written, and the courtyard use was described and now locked in, or so we thought. 15 years after that, between 2008 and 11, we were tested. The Toll House showed us their noise on Friday, Saturday, some Thursdays, and Sundays. Dances, weddings, large events, entertainment, music, amplified sound began. For me, the bass pounded against my windows and my body, and I couldn't go to sleep at night until that had all come to a conclusion. I couldn't relax in front of the TV because the sound inside my house with the windows closed was too loud for me to hear the TV. And I couldn't invite friends over because it was not so tasteful and very loud, and we couldn't have a conversation anyway. Totally invasive. Eventually, the neighborhood, the town, the police became involved. A series of meetings, and I can't contain all this in 3 minutes. But the town ordered the Toll House to change their CUP to match their action. And this was followed by months and years of meetings, and the Toll House came to understand the thinking of the nearby residential community and dropped the application. In the last 4 years, the town has revised the entertainment and alcohol policies, and the hotel has remodeled and is now petitioning to change their CUP regarding the same things. Since experiencing the noise of 2008-11, we can speak not from imagination, but experience the huge disturbance to home life, inability to relax, no sleep until past 10, forced sound of unwanted playlists, several days a week, open-ended for years and years. So once it's in place, then question mark.
Thank you, Ms. Randolph.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Kane.
Ms. Randolph, you sent us the letter that we received on September 12th. I want to thank you for that. And in there, you talked about the noise being louder than your TV. And you also said your windows would shake.
I did.
Rattle and roll. Do you have faith or understanding that if this project was to go forward, that the noise ordinance in and of and by itself might give you some relief?
I can't be sure. There's a trust factor for me because I see that it's spelled out in the CUP, and yet a lot of it isn't accommodated. And it goes into some of the other things listed on the CUP. We're only talking about entertainment and amplification tonight, but the number of people that are allowed to be served on the patio, there's a discrepancy. we talked about the different, trying to think of the word, but the courtyard belongs to whom? There's the patio, which is a different area. There's the indoor restaurant. Who has what belongs to whom or what? I mean, I've tried to break it down myself and really know it before I got up here to talk about it. It's
Well, I was thinking that a person whose windows rattled, and I do not doubt that they did.
yeah, okay.
We have changed the law, and there's a possibility that this could be permitted. And I'm thinking, well, what if this, what if that? You know, we've got the noise ordinance, and what Commission has done in the past is put in subsequent reviews that we would try something and we'd review it in 3 months and then 3 months and then 3 months, not just one and then let it go away. Would that cause you to reconsider your position?
To be honest, no. It's a trust factor, and there's a time element because I see how once something is in place, then they go up another level sometimes. Very often, I've watched how how this works. So I would think that once they got permission to have entertainment and amplification before 10, then they might want to apply to have it after 10. And so where does it stop?
Thank you very much.
And by the way, my house is 101 years old. And there are other older houses around there. They're not all built with soundproofing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell has a question of staff.
Yes. I don't recall the DBA. I'm assuming DBA would be used by the ordinance, but I haven't read the ordinance in years. Could you tell me, so I have an orders of magnitude difference between what the DBA level is before 10 versus after 10?
So the general daytime noise limits, and I believe it's actually 9 to 10, that changes to nighttime. That's 75 decibels measured 25 feet from the source. That's the daytime. And they're
10?
asking for daytime. I can give you nighttime, but
What is after 10? Or after 9, you're telling me, I think.
yeah, nighttime. Depending on the receiving zone. So for the source zone being non-residential and the receiving zone being residential, it's 60 dBA.
Okay, and
Measured.
from what you're reading, sometimes they give an example of that. For example, they'll say, airplane is, whatever the DBA is, and so on and so forth. Are there any examples there?
Well, staff did find an example coming from the University of California, Los Angeles, just one example. Passenger car at 65 miles per hour at 25 feet measures 77 decibels. So that's somewhat comparable to the 75 at 25 feet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Lenhart, followed by Larry Lenhart.
Hi, my name's Luke Lenhart. I live at 30 Broadway, which is on Lower Broadway, and I'm facing the opposite side of the Toll House. I'm currently a high school student, and I play water polo and I study hard. And currently I'm a junior in high school, and I'm studying hard for my AP tests, SAT tests, and further studies in order to get into college in my furthering studies. And my studies start well before 10 o'clock, as soon as 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And being able to study in that sort of time with an amplified noise would extremely hurt my entire high school career as well as my sleep, and just being able to live an enjoyable life as I've lived for the past 15 years as a resident in Los Gatos. In the past, when I was experiencing the noise that the Toll House had produced before 10 o'clock and the amplified sound, my dog was agitated. I couldn't get to sleep. I was younger at this time, middle school, and I couldn't get to sleep before 10, 11 o'clock at night. And just being able to study before then was really difficult. And I really recommend that this application was denied. For your time.
Thank you, Luke, for your comments. Larry Lenhart.
I live on 30 Broadway, as you guys know. Raised my family there, lived there for 18 years, and that was my son. First of all, I'd like to address the physical locations. They talk about what areas of the compass are affected by this event. So if you look at the Toll House in 360 degrees, 240 degrees are directly into residential community. Of the other 440 degrees, it hits commercial, but it also hits, part of that commercial is a toll house. So it hits those walls and then goes right back into the residential. So any amplified sound is actually accelerated up into Broadway. So this accelerates, and that's mainly why any amplified sound makes such a big difference. We talked about the items on the CUP. Two things we haven't addressed yet. One is that will not impair the integrity and character of the zone. Well, the zone that we're talking about is the most historic area in Los Gatos. It's the oldest street in town. And there are areas of the town compliance that are specifically restricted on the historical areas. As a matter of fact, the town code states in historic districts the proposal will not adversely affect its relationships in terms of the harmony, appropriateness of surroundings, and adversely affect the character, aesthetic interest, or the value of the district. This is the most historic area, and we're going to definitely affect that for sure. Also, if you think about all the town codes we talk about, we always talk about not affecting the value. Not affecting the values of the home. So if you look at bankrate.com, the National Appraiser Society, and the Business Insider magazine will highlight that if there's any obtrusive sound or obstruction that is inconsistent with the rest of the neighborhood, the value of that home could be affected by at least 10%. I talked to a number of real estate agents in Los Gatos, and they confirm that's the case. So what we're actually going to do is decrease the value of the homes that are affected by this consistent music and amplified sound that may happen. So I, just for fun, went to Zillow. I ran the math. I took 10% for the folks that are close and 0 to the folks that were farther away. It would actually degrade the value of our homes by $4.5 million in aggregate. That's a significant impact to the home values of all of us, our hard savings, and everything we've done from that perspective. Now we take that $4.5 million and apply it to a company based out of the state of Louisiana who operates the toll house. It doesn't sound like such a great idea. So I hope you do reject the CUP or withhold our current CPA that's in place that we fought so hard for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lenhart. Jillian Verga.
Hi, my name is Jillian Verga, and I live at 46 Broadway. One of the problems with this current situation is that the toll house has created an adversarial relationship with its neighbors. I realize that started back in a time prior to the current management, but quite honestly, I was very surprised to hear Mr. Gurney say he had a good relationship with his neighbors. I would beg to differ. First of all, there's been zero outreach to neighbors on this issue at all. And then Jason Bogan's letter in the petition and also Mr. Gurney's comments today were really not about the neighbors. It's clear that they feel that their need to recoup their remodeling value and expand their wedding business is more important to them than the neighbors' concerns. In addition, the toll house currently violates its CUP on a regular basis, and I think they've talked about that openly today. Condition 3 on their CUP states that the outdoor seating shall not exceed 36. Condition 5 states that the outdoor seating shall not be used for banquet, reception, or conference purposes. These conditions were put in place specifically because this is a hotel on the edge of a historic residential neighborhood. However, the toll house frequently holds wedding receptions, dinners, and corporate conferences and other events on their patio, as they've been quite open about. Many corporate events include an evening reception on the patio. We dropped by last Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings, and they were having a thriving reception on their patio on each of those nights. In fact, last Friday, the patio was set with over 150 chairs. So clearly, they have a pretty thriving business of holding weddings, receptions, banquets, and conferences on their patio in violation of their CUP. And if I were a planning commissioner, I might be asking, why are they not petitioning to change items, conditions 3 and 5 on their CUP so that they can be in compliance on these events? Is it because they plan to just continue violating those conditions, knowing that there will be no repercussions? Because, in fact, what is the point of having entertainment on your patio if you cannot have a banquet, reception, or conference on your patio. We have a complete lack of trust in the Toll House. The neighbors don't believe for an instant that any entertainment on the patio will be controlled or monitored by them with the interests of the neighbors at heart. Therefore, we feel they should be held to their existing CUP, a CUP which was written for a hotel, a place where people come to sleep, and not an entertainment venue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verga. Appreciate the comments. Vice Chair Kane, yes.
I have a question of staff, if I may.
Yes.
I want to make sure I'm reading the existing CUP correctly. If they're holding a conference out on the patio, or a quiet wedding, or a benefit for Jazz in the Plaz, does that violate their CUP?
And Mr. Paulson can confirm, but no, the CUP talks about outdoor entertainment on the courtyard. It also talks about the use of the patio, which is the patio outside of the restaurant.
So if there was a corporate conference out there or a benefit out there, that would not necessarily violate the CUP.
So I'll try to add a little bit more. So there's two different areas. There's the patio, which is the raised area adjacent to the restaurant, and there's the courtyard. So the CUP, as it's currently written for that banquet conference, is outdoor seating on that raised patio area. Does not, the courtyard is specifically called out separately from the noise perspective, and so that's staff's interpretation of that.
So if the function was on the courtyard section, not up on the elevated patio, would that be a violation of the CUP?
We don't believe so.
Thank you.
Do we have any further speaker cards? Scene one, come forward. No, this is our last one before we get the applicant. Angelia Dorner.
Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove, also in a historical district. Everything around downtown Los Gatos is in a historical district. So, setting that aside, the policy is very liberal. We're talking about restaurants and hotels and places with alcohol, but you've got to understand that a furniture store can have entertainment by their front door and still be held by this same policy. If they have a CUP that doesn't say anything about entertainment, they can do it without coming to you at all. If they have a CUP, I can't imagine they would have a CUP that talked about entertainment. But anyway, I really think that it's important to set some things in perspective here. When it comes to the prior noise issues at the Toll House, I could hear it over by CB Hannigan's. I seriously doubt anyone on Broadway could hear what goes on at CB Hannigan's now. I also am surprised about the comment from Mr. Benson. Okay, I live maybe 6 or 7 houses away from CB Hannigan's. They do control their decibels. They are out there and testing. If there's ever a complaint with neighbors, they do have late night entertainment when someone requests to do it. And I would hope that they even have more before they get shut down for other reasons than just the rent. Anyway, I just really think that, we've got a lot of things that are going to be addressed with this. I hate to think that every single time that there's a band or something playing downtown, that someone's going to be running to you all or to the council. This thing was vetted vetted at the town council meeting. So all I can say is, prior history should not be damaging the new owners of the Toll House. I think they deserve the respect as a property owner to give them a shot, see if there is a way that they can set up some practice situations and let the neighbors hear and understand each other's control issues. I just don't think it's fair at all. I think it would be a disadvantage to say that they're just not allowed to take advantage of the new entertainment policy based on past history. I will tell you, if they ever do anything like past history, you'll be hearing from me. I'll be making the phone call from Wilder and Bachman. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that. And, You know, hey, there was music out Wednesday night in front of a furniture store, and it was great. People enjoyed it walking down the street. If there's room out there, they're going to do it. I hope they don't do it in front of Soul Cycle, because their music would drive me crazy. And, you know, I'll be holding the decibel monitor out in my front yard, you know, and if it's a problem, I'll let the police know. So there are ways to monitor it, and I just think that we're all going to have to be dealing with this major change to downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorner. I now invite the applicant back, Jim Gurney, for 5 minutes to add further comments regarding this application.
Thanks. You know, I'd like to start by saying I'm sorry. You know what? I had nothing to do with 2008 to 2011. I kind of picked up in the aftermath, and I do feel kind of bad. As a property owner, I would be upset if I had the same experience. I respect
Sir, could you address the commissioners,
sure,
please?
my apologies. I do feel bad. You know what? I respect it. I think that our behavior since the new owners have been on board has been commendable. I think that if it were not for the change in the town ordinance, we would not be here today. We would continue to oblige the conditional use permit, as I believe we have, based upon the interpretations that we have had, and we've really looked at this pretty holistically to make sure that we were being as respectful as possible. And it's disappointing that we're experiencing as much conflict, but two things that I heard that really kind of I wanted to address. One is, did we really do some outreach? And it was a recommendation that came that really we should try and look at 500 feet. 300 is kind of the rule. We walked 500 feet. We kind of really made sure we were safe. That took us up to number 50, Broadway. So we tried to do outreach to everybody. We've hand walked. We're doing an event October 6th. We really want to make sure that we understand what the pros and cons are, but we also want to make sure that if there's an ordinance that's going to benefit my business, I have an obligation to do that. I've got investors, I've got people in doing that, and I have to do that so that I don't step on the toes of the people that are around me. But the ordinance is built so that there are decibel levels, there are zones for those decibel levels. We have to adhere to them. I'm going to guess in 2011 those decibel levels will not adhere to. I think everything you've heard said there's no way decibel levels, whether it was legitimate or not, were adhered to. And we have those scope on what we can and can't do. I think that understanding who we are, what we want to be, as we evolve as a business, we are not the same community, we're not the same business we were in 1984. But the ordinance clearly tells us that the city's trying to change on the way it says, but it wants to do it and be respectful at the same time. I think we can jump on board and we can follow that role. I think that we've already demonstrated a different level of behavior. And I hope, I'm counting on you guys, sticking with your approval recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanson, followed by Commissioner Hudes, followed by Commissioner Birch.
I don't know if I misunderstood you. I thought you said you did neighborhood outreach, but then we got testimony that even from your next door neighbor that you did that they weren't aware that you did. So I'm trying to reconcile the
Sure.
two different things I heard.
Anybody that's between 2 and 50 Broadway, a letter was sent to last Friday. And I'll answer that question a little more specifically. With June 21 being the date the ordinance was changed, by the time July hit and we looked at what our opportunities, and we went and we came to the city or to the town and we talked about how should we process this when we were given the recommendation on how we should do it. This process really didn't commence, but maybe really late July or early August. By the time we really got the wheels going and getting it on your agenda and really starting this outreach and planning an event, we're in the middle of a week ago. Information was sent out. A number of people here mentioned they received a letter from Jason, and Jason's our hotel manager. So we did send out notices.
Well, okay. More generally speaking, I mean, you talked about your concern for the neighbors, and you said you took over this property in 2012.
Sure.
What other neighborhood outreach have you done other than the letter that you sent last Friday?
Well, since we started there, we have become the sole or exclusive sponsor for Jazz on the Plaza. We have a number of other community events we do. Our staff are involved with the chamber locally. We're pretty active in our community on a number of different levels, certainly on a business level, on partnering with local businesses that complement each other, and I hate to say it, through synagogues and mitzvah events and wedding planners and other things. And that's a business level, maybe not a residential level. But I think our key to the residential interaction has really been to make sure we didn't step on anybody's toes and make sure we didn't have any problems violating the noise ordinance or conditional use permit.
Okay, well, I would hope going forward that since you are right there on the border of a residential neighborhood, that you would, make neighborhood outreach a regular part of your process, because, you guys need to live with each other.
I think it's a great point, just in tonight on my attempt to apologize and to recognize our neighbors. When I got there, the neighborhood outreach was a little intense, based upon our acknowledgement of what the conditional use permit meant and our, adapting to it. So, great point, well taken, and I'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Udis.
I had a question about the modification to the existing conditional use permit that you're requesting. And I'm reading on Exhibit 4, that appears to be the conditional use permit that's in effect today, which is February 22nd, 1995. Is that the conditional use permit that you said you were made aware of during due diligence?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my question is why you're not requesting changes to the outdoor seating limit of 36, and why you're not requesting a change that would allow banquet, reception, or conference purposes?
Certainly, I'll answer that. As mentioned earlier, that banquet seating and area represents the upper seating area adjacent to the restaurant, not to the courtyard. And the interpretation that's been given to us is that the courtyard itself, we can't have amplified sound anywhere, but the seating restrictions does not apply to the courtyard, but to the patio.
That's the seating, and I don't see anything about that in the language here, by the way, but that refers to seating. What about the use? That outdoor seating shall not be used for banquet, reception, or conference purposes. When you have a wedding, is there outdoor seating?
Certainly.
And is that considered a reception?
No, we can't. Well, because we can't have any amplified noise of any sort out there, we can have a ambient sound ceremony outside with no amplification. And again, I think the distinction of the area of the upper patio and the courtyard is something that is not clear in everybody's eyes, but our challenge and our digging deeper into the interpretation of that has led us to believe that the upper patio, we can seat 36, but can't have conferences. The lower courtyard is not, because it's not part of the restaurant, it's not part of that CUP interpretation, and therefore it's part of the hotel, and we can still do other events as long as they're not amplified.
Well, I'm reading here, point 5, outdoor seating use. The outdoor seating shall not be used for banquet, reception, or conference purposes. It doesn't talk about balconies. It doesn't talk about courtyards. It
Certainly.
talks about it talks about the property owner and the location.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the actual overall scope of the conditional use permit, identifying the conditional use permit to be in reference to the Toll House restaurant in the original opening kind of paragraph for the conditional use permit. So the restaurant is, the actual conditional use is placed on the restaurant, not on the hotel, because the restaurant has an upper patio. The upper patio is designated in the conditional use permit specifically with seating and use. All areas are identified with use relative to amplified sound. So we apply the seating and use to the upper patio. We apply the amplification to all areas.
Okay, I appreciate your testimony. I don't see anything in the use permit that reflects that. I'll have some questions to staff about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Would staff like to weigh in? Or?
Yeah, as previously stated, the CUP is for the restaurant only. The outdoor seating and conference banquet is that upper level. It is not the courtyard. The courtyard is the hotel. However, as mentioned, the amplified sound requirement restriction does also flow to the courtyard as referenced in the CUP.
Commissioner Hudas, you had Commissioner Birch? Who has the question? Commissioner Birch.
So, a couple questions to see how amendable you would be. You are right next to residential, and I'm going to be pretty sympathetic to the whole homework situation. If moving forward we were to frame this up in a way that said, no music Monday through Thursday, would that be amendable to you?
I'm open to almost any compromise at this point. As long as I can become a little bit more like other restaurants in Los Gatos.
Right, and I can't imagine people putting on a banquet on a Tuesday, but and would you be?
We do have actually ceremony, like celebrations of life.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
And would you be amendable if we wrote something into this as far as, like Commissioner Kane had mentioned, some check-in points, like every 3 months for a year or something like that where...
Love the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to be an open book about this.
Great. Thank you.
Vice Chair Kane?
I'll try very hard to put this in the form of a question. Given what you've heard tonight, would you reconsider your view of the quantity and quality of your outreach? Would you reconsider 300 feet as a standard by which we're recused from a case as opposed to checking out the entire street? Because I'm thinking that's what you and I have heard tonight. Would you consider giving it to a local staff person to make thoroughly sure that the outreach is effective? This is a different situation is what I'm hearing. Sure. There's history here that you may not have been aware of, and so you just walked into a hornet's nest. Did you know that? I got to make it a question. I would ask you, my question is, would you reconsider the quality and quantity of your outreach?
100% yes. You know what, as I mentioned, we are scheduled to do an open house on October 6th specifically to kind of reintroduce people into the new investment that we have. But I think that if we were able to do sound studies, talk about what the decibels, talk about what this is doing. I mean, I want everybody's input in this. But as you know, it's funny, the feedback in 2011 was far less than hospitable and before my time, and I get why. It's been hard to try and crack that egg and get back into the game, back in the sandbox. But I'd love to do it. Any recommendations?
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. The public testimony portion of the public hearing is now closed. Do commissioners have questions, comments, or a motion? And Commissioner O'Donnell has his hand up first.
I look at this, that the town passed an ordinance which does not specifically speak to a use permit which has its own condition. It is a general ordinance. So I don't feel constrained by that ordinance. But let me also say this. I don't know if anything can be done. I really don't. But I do think before we would say we're going to experiment, we're going to find out for 6 months or 3 months or a year, I would like to see, if that were to be the condition, I would like to see up front a study. A sound expert could do it, but I find, for example, that 75 dBA would be very annoying to me if I listened to that all day. And yet, our ordinance says all day long you can have, you don't violate the noise ordinance unless you're 75 and above. I also know that nobody really enforces that because you'd have to have a big staff. Cops don't enforce that, and that's not their job. They get calls at night when it's real noisy. So if we were to try to work out something, I would personally want to see something from a sound expert which would give me some comfort that we could do this. Because at the moment, I find some of my fellow commissioners would like to work something out, and certainly I'm not against that. But I am more sympathetic with the simple statement that I'm not in favor of changing that use permit. My experience is that, as I said before, I live virtually downtown. I have enough trouble with the freeway, but 75 dBA is a pain. And so I would like to find out what the noise level would be were we able to try to implement some change to the use permit that said, based on the study, here's what you're going to do, as opposed to saying, let's give you a year and we'll check it. Because I think that would be unfair to the homeowners if they had to put up with that for a year and find out, oh, they were right to start with. So I just throw that out because before people come up with a motion, I would not support today a change in the use permit. I would be sympathetic to and receptive to trying to do something which would both satisfy the needs of the hotel while not affecting adversely the neighbors. I don't know if there's something to be done, but I know that I don't know enough to be able to do it.
So, Commissioner O'Donnell, can you just clarify then, you may be leaning towards a continuance to get more information from staff regarding noise studies?
In the course of my career, I have had noise problems where we did hire sound people, and you can at least have an educated estimate of where you're going. We don't have that. I don't question for a moment the good faith of these folks out here, but I do know that the history isn't good, but that wasn't their fault. But even with good faith, we don't know. Let's assume they comply, and let's assume that they never go above 74 dBA. What does that mean? And if I live at 50 or whatever the address is, I'm trying to do my homework or whatever I'm trying to do, what's that going to be like? I would like to know that before we simply take this out and say, let's give them a year to find out what it's like, because we still won't know. If the study comes back and says, oh, they're never above 74, well, what does that mean? So if that means that it's very annoying if you have to listen to that 4 or 5 hours a night, I'd like to know that. So yes, I would consider continuing the matter if the applicant were willing to give us, by a recognized sound expert, some guidance on this. So that's what the answer is, yes.
Vice Chair Kane.
Just to clarify, I didn't say 1 year. I said every 3 months for a period of a year or so to put some integrity behind the motion. That's what I'm thinking of, a staged test. We've talked about it before. I have a question for staff. In addition to what Commissioner O'Donnell said in terms of considering a continuance, would it be appropriate as part of the testing to decide decibel levels and that sort of thing, to give the toll house an opportunity to come up with a plan, not a letter of nice, but a plan with people and contacts and phone numbers and an understanding from staff what their responsibilities are, what they could do about baffles in chambers or deflecting sound. You know, they know their business better than I do. But I'd like to see a plan that would be viewed as a promise or a commitment regarding a special circumstance. This isn't Gardino's. This isn't Chicago Steak and Fish. This is a bar, restaurant, noisemaker on the edge of Broadway, which is a very historic district, as are many others, that has a bad history. And that I think here is more salient than anything else. They've been lied to and cheated and terrible things. And I think there needs to be a plan going forward of outreach, of promises, of commitments, consistent with the town's ordinances, but something from them to the residents to include a contact person, whatever else. I'd like to add that to Commissioner O'Donnell's consideration for a continuance.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm going to make a motion, and then it can be discussed, but I'll put something on the table if I can get a second. But I would move that we continue the matter to a date certain to allow the applicant to perform a relevant sound study by a certified consultant, and that sound study should tell us what the sound level would be. And you want to take a worst case. You want to talk about an orchestra or a band for a wedding outdoors. And I would like, whatever that is, and hopefully it's going to be 74 or less, I would like to relate that to what that means. Because I don't know. I mean, but I have the feeling that if I listen to a car going by 65 miles an hour all day long, I'd either go deaf or go nuts. And it doesn't make me feel better to know that it's only 75 dBA. So if there were a sound study, and I've seen these before, they will relate the dBA to common sounds. That would be helpful. This is not a guarantee that by doing a sound study that, for example, that would convince me to change this use permit. On the other hand, without that kind of evidence, I'd find it very hard to tell people, don't worry about it, we'll check it for 3 months or 6 months or whatever. So my motion would be that we do that. As far as the outreach is concerned, I would leave that so after they came back with a study, if they do. Is there some comment somebody's going to make?
Yeah, I was just going to offer that previously you're referencing the 65 mile an hour car. So that is a threshold that gets you to 75. I don't know if there's other things on that list that you have that relate to music, bands.
We don't know, however, what the noise level would be off-site. Let's pick a 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever. So yes, we now know we have one thing was 75. I'm hopeful that the sound that the neighbors would be exposed to wouldn't be 75, wouldn't be 74. We'd be down somewhere where the sound expert says, that's like this, and everybody says, oh, well, that's not bad. So I say that, but I think I need a second before we bother with any more time on my motion.
Vice Chair Kane?
I'll second the motion, but it seems we need to get a nod from the applicant that they want a continuance or they want it up or down. Do we need that?
Well, you don't need that, but I mean, obviously this is a recommendation. Those could be made into a motion, whether it's denial or approval for the recommendation.
Right. I have other comments to make, but I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Hudes?
I'm generally supportive of the motion. I do have a concern, and that is that the conditional use permit runs with the property, correct, with these APNs. And so while we may have good intentions of this particular owner now, this may be here 30 years from now. And so I'm concerned that the way it's written currently, having outdoor seating for wedding receptions is not permitted. And so I'm wondering if it's possible to be more specific about where outdoor seating is or is not permitted on balconies or courtyards or things like that, because I don't see any language about that in the CUP as it's written now.
The policy specifically, since they have only opened it up for entertainment, that's the only condition that can be looked at. If you want to make as part of a recommendation to council that they provide some more clarification or that they confirm staff's interpretation, that's fine. But none of the other conditions can be opened up as part of this current process.
Make this comment. It seems to me that if you were to approve some entertainment use there, while you don't have a right to change other things, well, we're not talking about the ordinance in the moment. We're talking about the use permit. And to the extent that somebody wants to amend a use permit, I don't believe that's covered by the ordinance. The ordinance doesn't speak about modifying use permits. If they did, they could have said, this applies not only to people that don't have use permits, it applies to people that do have use. Whether that'll be legal or not, I don't know. But they didn't do it. So if somebody comes to me and says, I want to modify my use permit by removing that condition, and I say, ultimately, you may do so long as the facts we understand to be this are the case. And if they say, yes, those are that is the case, then I think that speaks to Commissioner Hudes' point. You're not trying to rewrite the use permit, but you are trying to understand what they're asking for. Unless the council said we intend this to apply to existing use permits, which certainly isn't on the face of the ordinance, I think we have a right to say, you want us to remove that condition, but we have to know what the impact is, and assuming, therefore, I'm not writing it now, and I don't want to write it now. I think we need more information, and I think we possibly could get to the clarification. I'm prepared to accept the staff saying, we have always interpreted it that way, notwithstanding an argument could be made to the contrary. And certainly, the owners have relied on that, and I would not seek to walk back on that. World would be a lot simpler if we had a better drafted use permit. But anyway, enough talking for me.
The policy does, specifically state that if these use permits are opened up to address this issue, that is the only issue that can be considered by the decision makers. And I'd like to just piggyback on that for 1 second, which is that the council is the decision maker in this case. So this evening, the issue before you is a recommendation to council. You could make a recommendation that includes your concerns.
Well, my recommendation now would be no. So rather than give a recommendation of no, we're giving them an opportunity before we make our recommendation to give us something to hang our hat on. And we can clearly do that.
All right. Commissioner Hanson.
Supposing that this, process could continue the way it's been moved and seconded, the one thing that it would be really important in a sound study, I think, was we had a lot of testimony from the neighbors about the way that sound actually gets amplified in that particular neighborhood. So a generalized thing about what does 75 decibels mean isn't going to be as relevant as what does 75 decibels mean if you're in 45 Broadway or you're in, 5 houses down. I think that's the kind of thing that I would be looking to hear about versus generalized.
As the maker of the motion, maybe I wasn't clear. A sound study is a sound-specific study of the site and the noise emanating from the site. It isn't a theoretical discussion of sound.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Kane.
Just want to add, whatever we decide on with this sound study, it would behoove the applicant, to the extent possible, Mr. Bogan, to identify your neighbors and involve them in whatever you're doing. I'm ready to.
Well, I would like to just add a comment because all right, so we can get the study, and I'd be in favor of continuing it. But we could, find out what 75 decibel levels may sound like, but there's different types of music, and different types of music can be annoying and a nuisance to one person over another. It's just like beauty's in the eyes of the beholder.
In reason, I absolutely agree with you. But what I guess I'm saying is, if one has a conversation outside of my condominium, normal conversation, that shouldn't bother me, a normal level conversation. Even if they're using profanity or whatever, to the extent that it becomes louder than the conversation itself would bother me, and if they were using profanity or whatever, it might bother me more. So I don't know what this noise level would be. It is conceptually possible that no matter what they play, if it's low enough, it's not going to bother you. And, this may be a wild goose chase, and if the applicant says, gee whiz, I don't mind doing it, but it doesn't make any sense, they can just tell us, and then we'd have to decide. So if this sounds like it's too fanciful, tell me.
Well, are we looking for a nod from the applicant then, if they are amenable to coming back?
I would kind of like to know how the commission feels first.
My comment was that I would be supporting the motion that you made.
Okay. Well, that's 3 of us, I think, that I'm aware of.
Commissioner Birch.
4.
So I'll be quick. I probably have been privy to way too many sound studies based on what I do. So I can reassure everybody that there's going to be a central point, the source, and then they go out in a radius. So you also need to remember that this is 75 decibels at 25 feet from the source, which is basically going to be from one side of the courtyard to the other. And then what they will do is they will measure in increments out as far as we designate. So Joel could tell them I want it 500 feet away or 1,000 feet away, and they will continue making radiuses that tell you that if it's 75 decibels at 25 feet from the source, it's going to be X decibels at 200 feet from the source. So these sound studies are quite thorough. They're quite accurate. They will also give you that is equal to listening to somebody whisper in the room next to you type of thing. So I think that would be very helpful. I will support that motion. You can usually get them very quick. I think we could do this quite quickly and have this resolved.
Vice Chair Kane.
In addition to community involvement, could we have a planning commission representative in on the sound study? I'm sorry, let's move on.
Commissioner Hanson.
I just wanted to weigh in that I wouldn't be comfortable approving a CUP, especially one this close to a residential neighborhood, this kind of change without having a sound study. So if we can't do this, then, I still wouldn't be comfortable making a recommendation to do it.
All right, so I think we've gotten our comments, so I am going to call the question. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes unanimously.
We need a date certain, though, would be helpful.
All right, so looking for a date certain to add to the motion?
I'm going to suggest 60 days. And if the applicant doesn't like that, it's too short, a nod of the head, we can make it longer. I'm trying to make it short for you. We can make it 30 days. So 30 days then. Let's make it 30 days. You can always come back and ask for further extension. But
Well, the reality is we have 3 meetings between now and January.
That's true. Staff will have to tell us the first available date.
The first one currently, realistically, looking at the continued items from previous meetings, is technically November 9th.
Well, then let's move it to November 9th.
All right, so does the seconder accept that?
Yes.
All right, I'll call the question again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Mr. Paulson, this is a motion to continue, but are there appeal rights on the action of the commission?
There are not.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Paulson, do you have a report for us this evening?
Just briefly, I know we sent out an email earlier this week about some changes to the commission appointment policy. There's no specific changes to the planning commission policy, but the general commission appointment policy and residency is included there, so that's the one that the planning commission will look at. And then secondly, as I'm sure you're all aware, over the last Thursday and then up till, well, I guess it's 2 Thursdays now, and then up till last Tuesday, the town council denied the North 40 Phase 1 applications.
Has there been a further development on that?
There has not.
Thank you.
All right, so I have a commission matter, and tonight I'd just like to give special thanks to Russell and the KCAT crew for meticulously airing our hearings to the public.
Hear, hear.
So with that, the meeting's adjourned.